Welcome everyone to the regular board meeting of the Upper Canada District School Board for April 23rd. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask that you all rise and join us in the singing of our national anthem. Director, proceed with roll call.
Trustee Buckland. Trustee Kartner. Present. Trustee Garrow.
Here.
Trustee McPherson.
Present.
Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Vice Chair McDonald.
Present.
Vice Chair McMillan.
Present.
Trustee McRae.
Present.
Chair Petersma.
Present.
Trustee Richards.
Present.
Trustee Swan.
Present.
Student Trustee Tyler Harper.
Present.
A motion for the consent agenda items, please. Trustee McMillan and Trustee Richards. Okay. Trustee McRae and Mr. Buckland's on here. Take it you're in favor, Trustee McRae?
It never came up.
Okay, any declarations, conflict of interest? Motion to move into committee of the whole. Trustee Swan, Trustee McAllister. All right, that passes. You may just want to make sure that you're in. You may have to go out and rejoin.
I just did that.
Okay. All right. Thanks everyone. That we're now in committee of the whole, and I'd like to invite Superintendent Susan Edwards to present the 2013 accessibility report.
Thank you, Chair Petersman. Just before I present the report, I'm just going to give a little bit of background and a little bit of a reminder on the goal of the Accessibility for Ontario's Disability Act, which was put into place in 2005. The goal is for an accessible Ontario by the year 2025. The Act outlines a framework for province-wide mandatory standards on accessibility. The Integrated Accessibilities Act, or standards, which you'll see within the report, is referred to as IASR, focuses on accessibility in the following 5 areas: customer service, employment, information, communications, transportation, and design of public spaces. The IASR outlines rules that businesses and organizations in Ontario must follow to identify, remove, and prevent barriers in order to have an accessible Ontario by the year 2025. The attached report in your board documents is really a good news story for Upper Canada. It documents the summary of actions undertaken in 2013, which both indicate Upper Canada's compliance with the legislation and, more importantly, our firm and ongoing commitment to accessibility. The board's accessibility plan is monitored by the Accessibility Committee. The Accessibility Committee includes a broad representation across Upper Canada, and our committee is comprised of a diverse group of representatives, principals and vice principals, facilities, transportation, purchasing, community memberships, HR, we have union representation, and CF. We have a total of about 20, and trustees. We have a total of about 20 Accessibility Committee members. And the committee works together to ensure compliance with AODA. And I just need to recognize trustees, two really champions of the committee, Vice Principal Nancy Holman and from Human Resources Penny Ravi, who have really helped to shepherd the work of the committee along. The attached report that you have indicates the compliance and the targets for 2014. And if you refer to it on your screen or there, the colors, I'll just go through the legend. The purple indicates that we have completed the standard or the section of the standard. The green indicates that we're right on track, and blue indicates that we're ahead of schedule, and there's a gray which indicates that we're monitoring. It's completed, but it requires ongoing monitoring as we go through. And in every section, we are compliant and ahead of schedule for school board requirements. Take a look at Section 4, the accessibility plans. We have a multi-year accessibility plan, which is posted on our website, and this keeps us focused on their short and long-term goals related to accessibility. And this is the plan that is monitored by the Accessibility Committee. If you take a look at Section 7, this is a tremendous amount of work and time from every employee in Upper Canada. And this section refers to training, all staff training, all employee training. The training was rolled out this year to all full-time and part-time and occasional staff members, which is over 4,000 members in Upper Canada. And we have, as part of the training plan, which we've also implemented, a plan for ongoing monitoring of the training requirement, which also includes new employee orientation and also for staff on leave when they come back in to ensure compliance that way. We will also, going into next year, training will be provided for volunteers within Upper Canada. Take a look at Section 11, the accessible formats for providing feedback. All schools in Upper Canada have a social media presence that allows instantaneous feedback from parents. Section 14, under the communication standards and website contact. Our existing contact is being checked for accessibility, and changes are made on an ongoing basis. We have a new website structure is coming, and that will be compliant with the Act. Some exciting news from our communication department in that the dashboard monitoring system is looking at being put into place for September of 2014 to monitor and manage school websites for accessibility. The dashboard monitoring system will provide a notification if there are any accessibility errors on any school website and why it needs to be fixed, and it links directly back to the Accessibilities Act. Section 16, under employment standards, is the training to educators. All of Upper Canada's educators have had training for accessibility. 90% of our staff have completed it, and we have a system, again, repeating before, but for system for monitoring for staff coming back from leaves. Section 22, under the employment standards, speaks about the notification about availability of accommodations in the recruitment process. This is now part of both the application process for any people wanting to apply for an employment position and also the new employee information practices. Section 25 for the employment section, to inform employees with policies supporting those with disabilities. Accommodation and return to work processes are in place and aligned with integrated standards. On Section 27, our emergency responses are to provide emergency response information to employees with disabilities. We have a very respectful approach to supporting our employees in this way. And Section 32, accommodation. The plans include accessibility considerations and individual accommodation and redeployment. Accommodation plans take careful consideration of each employee's accessibility needs. As we take if you look through and are taking a look at some targets for 2015, we are focused on the Accessibility Committee is focused on planning now to ensure compliance. Our learning comments and our information comments have already been looked at closely and are looking closely at the requirements and are planning and incorporating accessibility into their decisions, purchases, and visions. And also, as we look towards 2016 with the built environment, we currently work to exceed the minimum building code of 2012. Our new schools will reflect the revised code, and accessibility is a priority. The requirements for 2015 are a focus for us now and for any new construction and major renovation. So just to conclude, as I said earlier, this is a good news story for Upper Canada. The Accessibility Act complements our vision of all means all. And through the good work of all the employee groups and through all the departments, we have made great strides towards greater accessibility for all and support for the Ontario Act for Disabilities. Thank you.
All right, great, thank you. Trustees, comments or questions? Trustee McAllister?
Susan, could you tell me, give me an idea of the number of students and the number of employees who require accommodation under this act in our schools?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair Petersman, actually, I don't have any number. I know the number, for example, I can give you an approximation for number of students that we accommodate through special education, but through this act, I couldn't, I don't have that number.
Supplementary?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you could find that information at some point, is that possible?
But I think that the only question I would have, Trustee McAllister, is I don't think that has anything to do with this act. Like I mean, like we have to do this whether we have one person or 0 people. So,
right.
If you have a reason for asking for the information, then maybe that would help us.
I guess I'm just trying to determine the extent of the challenge.
Right.
And the other thing, if I might supplement,
go ahead.
would be what do you see as the greatest challenge for this board with regard to the implementation of this act?
Superintendent Edwards?
Through you, Chair Petersman, I think one of the greatest challenges, and I think this is the part that Upper Canadians have really risen to the challenge of, is the attitudes. And we were one of the first boards to reach 90% compliance of all our employees. And we did not receive pushback for the training. Some other boards did. So in terms of attitude, I think that we have a tremendous attitude across all of our employees. And I think that's based on the hard work around the table of all means all and pushing that vision forward. And I think attitude is often a barrier, and our work this year with regards to the training and the training of all staff that is not a barrier here for Upper Canada.
Thank you.
We worked with the format of the report a bit, and thank you, Susan, for making the changes I requested. To try to set it up so that we, as trustees, we could look at this and look at it quickly and say, okay, this is something that we need to focus a lot of attention on, or we're in good shape. And I think just to aid in our activities and governance. So thank you for doing that. But I think it does bear the fact that there's lots of green and purple, and that's good news, and blue, that's good news. So, Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out the act isn't really intended for our students or our staff. It's intended for all Ontarians, the parents, the community members, those people who may come into the buildings that we operate, the interaction they have with the phone. I think there's already sufficient legislation that would deal with our students on how we would accommodate students, and they're probably the same thing for staff. This legislation is meant to deal with level the playing field for what used to be called the anomalies, those one-offs where we would have someone come in that would be hard of hearing that couldn't hear something in a normal fashion, so we'd have to provide it now in print or in Braille or whatever the case might be, or in the built environment. Moving forward, we've always had those processes in place to make sure that new construction, and quite honestly, the Ontario Building Code ensures that new construction meets that accessibility standard. I think we need to make sure that we don't think of this as an effort to deal with our staff or our students. It's a necessary requirement across all public sector environments. In fact, it's a necessary requirement for all businesses in Ontario to make sure that we have those reasonable pieces put in place to deal with anyone that may come into interaction with our board. So whether it's a visible, any sort of accessibility that might stand out there, whether it's a physical, whether it's a visual, hard of hearing aspect, whatever the case might be, we need to make sure that we have a process in place, which we do, to address those needs. So it's beyond the scope of students and staff. And we need to make sure that we understand that and look at it in the context that it's meeting the needs of that family that just moves into the neighborhood that we didn't know about.
We were looking just when this came up at it, we got talking about ways that we could maybe able to do a better job in the governance side. So we're looking at options to either sign, or what options we would have maybe during board meetings to make sure that more people could, that all people could pay attention. So we're looking into that as well, and seeing what options we have. And any other comments, questions? Okay, great. Thanks very much, Susan. We will, board will see you again next year around the same time. Next item is an update on our bring your own device policy, policy 303. Use of personal electronic devices in classroom. We asked for an update on how that policy was being interpreted, used in the field, and we have our CIO and facility officer Jeremy Hobbs here tonight to give us an update. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you recall, obviously, the board passed policy 303 on the personal use or the use of personal electronic devices in the classroom last June. This is really our first full school year that we've actually had the benefit of operating under this policy. I know that the director kicked off the school year with an announcement to schools about the policy and sort of what the intentions were of the policy. And really my purpose here today is to give you a bit of an information technology perspective on this. And really, if you recall the mission of the IT department, our mission statement is that we connect people. And so that means connecting people to each other, connecting people to information, connecting people to the world outside the classroom or the office. And so really our main focus as a department is delivering capabilities to the staff and students out in our schools and offices. So to that end, we see this BYOD policy as a really instrumental step in helping people make those connections by allowing them to choose a device perhaps that is more personal to them, that they're more comfortable using, by allowing them to have that access continuously and access to services that they feel comfortable with in the context of their learning and work. So really from the IT perspective, the way we look at the BYOD policy so far is in terms of are people taking advantage of it? And right now, because it's so early days in the implementation of this policy, we're looking at it from that relatively simple perspective: is are people bringing their own devices to school? And we don't have a lot of information beyond that. So we don't have a lot of information in terms of people's perception of the BYOD policy. We certainly don't have a lot of information around direct connections of this policy to learning outcomes, if you will. But I do have some good data, I think, in terms of the uptake, and I have a good sense, I think, of the barriers to that uptake. So just to follow through, though the policy, I think, was a big step in formalizing our approach as a board and philosophy as a board, the actual technical elements of this go back to around 2007, when our board decided to put wireless networks in every school. So around the end of 2008, we were one of the first school boards that I was aware of, certainly, that had 100% coverage in all our schools. But more importantly, we made the philosophical decision to leave those wireless networks mostly open, so that kids could just get on them and use them. And it was kind of funny because some kids would come up to me and say, you know what, I know what the password is to the Wi-Fi. And I would say, that's okay. That's what the intention is. So we started to see a little trickle then. You could see, like in some schools, by monitoring our network, you could see that the trickle of iPods and things on the network really was starting to increase. Around 2010, we realized that this had taken off with the introduction of the iPad. There was a lot more interest among teachers in having mobile devices in the classroom, and certainly it became much more prevalent with kids having devices of various types. And so we deployed a new wireless system 3 years after deploying the first one that increased the number of access points out there by 5 to 7 times. So where we had 500 wireless routers to cover all our schools, we now have somewhere close to 3,000 wireless routers to cover our schools, because we now realize that kids and staff are bringing multiple devices in. It's not just bring your own device, it's bring your own devices in some cases. So in the last couple of years, our focus really has been on streamlining that. And at the heart of that, streamlining the process by which kids get on the network. Kids can use the network safely. They can use it in a way that's appropriate to the grade and age that they're working with. We also wanted to take steps to ensure that if we were deploying services, for example, student email or class calendars and those kinds of things, that if someone brought their own device into the classroom, they could bring the device in and we could actually get the service to them without them having to go through a lot of technical configuration steps. And so to that end, last year we've really done a big refresh on our management system, put in the system called AirWatch, which you may be familiar with. That really serves a couple of major purposes. Number one is it streamlines the process by which kids and staff get onto our wireless network. So our wireless network, as an example, is open to everybody, but if you're a guest and you're not a staff member or a student, you get a very restrictive experience. You don't get access to Facebook and those kinds of things. So once you enroll your device, then you get access to all that stuff online. The second piece, as I said, is it allows us to push services to people, because if you're going to bring the device in, philosophically, we'd like to facilitate those kind of educational or work-related uses of the device, and that a lot of times entails getting our email system on your device and configured. We want to make that easy. And then the third piece of it is there is a major role for us when a staff member particularly brings their own device in, and you pull email down, and that email may contain discussions with parents around students and those kinds of things. We have an obligation to protect that data from situations in which that person might leave their phone sitting out or leave it somewhere. We have an awful lot of corporate data on there, and we have an obligation to protect that. So these management systems really allow us to do that. So I'll just cut with that background to the data. And so really what we've been doing for the last few months is taking weekly snapshots and looking at the growth in the number of devices, personal devices on our network. And we've come up with a bit of a scheme for how we can monitor and track those. But what we've seen now is that you have the actual figures in your package. But in terms of board-owned devices, we've always had desktop computers in our classroom, and we've had some laptop computers floating around to an increasing extent. So a couple Wednesdays ago, we just took a look at what was out there, fairly typical day, and looking at around 6,000 board-owned computers, Windows-type notebooks or desktops on the network. At the same time, there's about 2,700 board-owned mobile devices. So really around 8,000, 9,000 devices sitting on our network that are board owned. The interesting thing about that, however, is that at the same time there's about 9,000 personal devices on the network that were not board owned. So probably for the first time we're getting to the point where on any given day at any given time there's either equal or more personal devices, bring your own devices on the network than board owned devices. And that is pretty much a common pattern throughout the day. A few years ago, when we would do the odd snapshot, you would notice a lot of iPods on the network at TIS before 9 o'clock in the morning, and then they would kind of disappear off the network. And really, to an increasing extent, what you're seeing is that computing devices of board-owned and personal devices are there in more or less equal quantities, sometimes greater for bring your own device, and they're being used throughout the day. And obviously, the bring your own device type classes in heavier use before and after school as well. Over the course of the last 6 to 8 months, we actually have been looking closely at enrollment. So there's a little process you go through. If you've been to a Starbucks or a Tim Hortons, there's a little quick process you go through to enroll. Ours isn't quite that elegant yet, but we're working on that. And we monitor how frequently people are enrolling their device or the uptake of that enrollment process, because when they enroll, that allows me to get services to them, and if that allows me to get services to them, that allows people to connect with each other more easily with the board-created communication tools. And then, in our theory, that's sort of facilitating as best we can the sort of learning and working process. So, over the course of the last few weeks, actually over the course of the last few months, the actual uptake has been steady. About 80 devices per week, personal devices per week enrolled, about equal proportions. Staff and students, and there's further breakdown I could give you on the type and all that kind of thing, but really we've seen steady increase. The interesting thing about it is the number of devices that aren't enrolled, and these are people that are using our networks and they're not getting the benefit of the services, they're not getting a really good Wi-Fi experience. There's still about double the number of devices that are enrolled, and so for us that's a kind of a market that we want to go after. So we're looking at why aren't these people enrolling their devices on our network, and how can we get them to enroll their devices? And the way we're doing it, rather than going about it and like sending memos to people or putting posters up and that kind of thing, is just trying to work the process to make the process easier until it becomes so easy and so obvious that there's a benefit there that people just enroll by default, right? So just a couple notes on sort of where we're going from here. So as I mentioned, one of the things that we want to do is get beyond this kind of straight numerical approach by using enrollment numbers as a proxy for what the uptake is, and start getting out to talk to students and teachers about their perception of the program, recognizing that that's probably the next step in the direction of getting a better sense of what the impact is of this. So Mr. Dawes and I have been talking about looking at doing some kind of student survey initially, just to see out of interest is how many kids are there out there, for example, that don't have devices? How many kids are there out there that might have devices but might never want to use them in school, for example? And then perhaps what is the perception of their use of their devices or in the classroom or in the classroom setting? So that's really our next step, and we've started talking about how we would go about doing that in order to sort of get a better picture of how this is being perceived. Second big issue is cost. It's kind of funny because when people say we're implementing a bring your own device initiative, often they see it as a cost-cutting measure. So if people bring their own device, I don't have to buy computers for them. And I can assure you it's actually considerably cheaper just to provide desktop computers and wire them into jacks in the walls than it is to sort of provide this wireless infrastructure. And just a couple of quick statistics. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, on an average morning, there would be like 3,000 to 4,000 PC devices live on our network. that was it. So last couple Wednesdays ago, there's about 17,000 devices on our network, and all those devices are consuming internet bandwidth and all those kinds of things that we need to pay for. So I use this statistic quite often. Between the time I started with the board 10 years ago and today, we were using 20 times the internet bandwidth that we were 10 years ago, and it increases. The second you increase the size of the pipe, the actual traffic expands to fill it. And without being able to measure it directly, if our intention here, if we have some sort of philosophical belief that somehow technology might be a positive influence in some way to education, we kind of say, okay, let's let that happen and see what people figure out how to do with it. So that's just a challenge, is the ongoing cost. And of course, the last one really is the holy grail for technology and education is really making a firm connection to learning outcomes. And when you look at the research, I would say probably at best it's been inconclusive because there's so many variables at play in what goes on with the student, right? But for us, I think that's another thing that we're starting to look at more deeply is rather than us just putting out a service and saying we're done with, we've put that capability out there, can we take it a little further and see if there's a way that we can characterize the value that capability will bring and test to see whether we've actually harvested any of that value at all.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Trustee McRae?
Through you, Chair. I just wondered, Jeremy, if there was any sense in terms of students, when the students bring out their personal devices, the students that are not in a position to have a personal device, what do they feel about all of this? And in terms of, are we in a position in our classrooms that when everybody else brings out their personal devices and starts to work on them, that there is an accommodation for these students? Like they can go somewhere else to be serviced in the same way on a different personal device?
Jeremy?
Mr. Chair, that's an excellent question. And it's one that I think we sort of referenced it explicitly in the report in your package. I mean, it's been interesting looking at some of the experience of the SIA program where you're providing kids that have designated exceptionalities perhaps with devices, laptops or iPads to an increasing extent now. And what we've seen to a certain extent is that when they're the only ones with the device in the classroom, it becomes a bit of a stigma. So there's a bit of a stigma to not having a device. Sometimes there's a stigma to having a device. Sometimes there's also a stigma to having the wrong device. And it's, if I don't have the newest iPad or whatever, that there's a bit of a stigma there. So to me, I think in our strategy, there's been lots of school boards around the world that have tried to do one-to-one programs. And in other words, they give one laptop per child or one device per child. And to me, there's been, I don't know of one of those programs that's been sort of successfully sustained over the long term, because usually what happens is they just crumble under their own weight. They run out of money to be able to, I can buy everyone an iPad this year, but in 3 years when 30% of them are broken, I don't have the money to refresh them at that point. So to me, the BYOD program is a means of saying, okay, some kids are always going to want to bring their own device in. I'm not sure whether it'll be better or worse than anything that we might provide, but it will be their own preference. And so to me, the challenge remains is for the kids who aren't covered is, can we actually provide them choice as well? Because, if you believe that choice of a device is good for some kids, then to me it's good for all kids. So how do we provide them some choice so that they get to pick what works for them? And then the bigger question to me is, how do we make it, the fact that they didn't bring their own, opaque, perhaps. I'm not sure whether it's transparent or opaque, but I don't want people to see the difference, right? And that's kind of, I think the BYOD program is going to be instrumental for us in serving those kids better. If that's I'm not sure I've answered that very well.
Trustee McMillan?
Through you, Chair. As you were doing your presentation, I was starting to get a sense of frustration and a feeling of futility when it came to actually getting evidence data that would actually speak to the effectiveness of bringing the BYOD into our schools in terms of engagement and student achievement, so on. And then you branched into another area that kind of gave me hope. A lot of reading I've been doing lately, dealing with two terms, big data and rich data. And big data is the collecting of how many do we have in our schools, how many are turned on. The rich data, or the thick data, is data that comes from the conversations, the stories that we're going to find out when we talk to the students, we talk to the teachers, how they're being effectively used and implemented. And I think when we go down that pathway, then all of the questions that I had in my mind are going to start to be answered in terms of the conversation and the stories that come out. And then again, and with Trustee McCrae, that story will come into play of how students feel that don't have the devices. But I mean, as far as looking at student achievement, or maybe not even student achievement, but student engagement improving or increasing because of the use of these devices, that will come out as we start to look at thick data as opposed to the big data in terms of numbers. So I was feeling frustrated, but I feel a lot better now that you extended into that side of the conversation, because I think it's a critical part of this equation to see if we're being successful or not.
I think, you know, one of the things that bears keeping in mind is the fact that when we laid out the policy, what we were attempting to do was to ensure that any child that wanted to bring a device was allowed to, or provided the opportunity, and that we supported them. So just as if a student wanted to bring their own basketball, because maybe it's a better basketball, I don't know whether there's such things, they should, you know, they can do that. If they want to bring a device, that we facilitate that. And the policy doesn't even get into their usage or their classroom usage or element of fairness to access or anything. It's strictly to make sure that any parent that makes the decision, or any child that makes the decision to bring a device to school, is not told to leave it at home or to leave it in the locker, that they're allowed to use it as they see fit, as long as it meets up all the other codes of conduct and various other things. And I think that we're starting to get a handle that you have the infrastructure in place to do that. At some point we may want to consider the next level, and but the policy that we passed is quite simple. Is it possible for a student to bring a device and use it in our schools?
I like the analogy about the basketball. It simplifies it. Through the chair, what grade level, maybe you don't have a way of measuring this, but which grade level, and be honest with you, I've seen kindergarten kids with cell phones, but what grade level is actively engaging as? Like, there's got to be a thin edge of a wedge somewhere where all of a sudden that age of student starts to use this program.
Interesting question. I don't have that information for you, but I can get it. So just to elaborate a little bit, I was watching a webcast from the new CEO of Microsoft a week ago or so, and he talked about this concept called the data exhaust. So he talks about the idea that, like, the reason why Facebook is free is not because they want you to connect with your family, it's because they want your data. They want to know what you're doing, they want to know who you're talking to, they want to know what you like, what you value, because then they can use that to make, and their other advertisers can use it to make intelligent decisions about how to sell you more stuff. I mean, we're not in that business, but you take this seemingly innocuous activity, just, you know, posting your favorite casserole recipe up or whatever, and they're drawing conclusions about that. And so we've been for some time trying to model something similar. My belief is that probably information technology, one of the biggest hurdles to just systemic learning improvement is managing the information about the student. To a certain extent. So our kind of goal a little bit is to keep people in our environment so we can harvest that data exhaust and build a wealth of intelligence on people. So all the stuff like the grade, those kinds of things, that's easy to get. So if that's something you're interested in, we've architected it so we can grab that intelligence out. You know, we're not looking at what you're shopping for on Amazon.com or anything like that, but we can grab that kind of intelligence so we can serve the kids better, for sure.
and I'm going to go to Trustee McDonald next, but when you presented the data, we asked if you had data to compare it, and at the time you don't, but next time we ask for it, you'll have data to compare.
Yep.
So, Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. Just to go over a couple of the points that some trustees had already made, I think we go back to a long way back when I was in high school. We had devices, and some kids had better devices than others, and those were just the scientific calculators. You know, some were able to do graph on it, and some could do addition and subtraction, division and multiplication. So times have changed in the sense that the calculator now is a little bit bigger, and it's now able to do more than just graph what you need to do. So it's always been there, as far as some students having something better than what other students may have. And to you know, ping off of that, we heard from Mr. Beck last week at Viscount Alexander, and I would suspect that many of our schools are in the same situation, that we've got classroom sets or school sets of iPads and iPods and smart boards and all kinds of things that are used in the schools that teachers embed into how they teach their regular day-to-day curriculum. But the policy that we have and the ability that we have with this open network is that if there isn't enough for that class, there's students that do have their own are able to use their own. And I'm sure, I'm very positive that the teachers are very cognizant of those types of things and would not put students into a situation that they would feel any different than the students or their peers in their classroom. And it stuck with me too that originally when I thought of bring your own device, it was always going to be high school in my view. We heard from Mr. Beck last week that even in elementary, K to 6, we have students who are bringing their own devices. And so the utilization at an elementary school with school-supported devices and their own devices is I think upwards of 80%, if I can't really recall the exact numbers, but it was fairly high. And that's, you know, I think fairly relevant that most kids today have access to those devices. I mean, a 7-inch tablet is available at Walmart for the same price as what we used to think of a scientific calculator. So the devices have come down in pricing, and I think more and more people have access to it and are able to use those devices in whatever way they choose. But a question I have for Mr. Hobbs was, when you mentioned about TIS having so much traffic, and I use TIS as an example, so much traffic at whatever 7 o'clock, and all of a sudden it would flick off back in the day. Do we see that now? Because I want to understand that the policy is being used in the way that we intended it to be used, that we may have the Wi-Fi available throughout our schools, and those points of access are available. But are we still seeing the traffic throughout the day, or is it sporadic at 8 o'clock in the morning and at noon and at 3:20? Do we still see that traffic flow in the what we consider instructional time?
Mr. Chair, I would say just anecdotally, and I could get you some better data on that, I think, if we took some snapshots throughout the day. But just the profile that we've been witnessing is that we can draw a fairly distinct line between what's a personal device and what's a board-owned device. And so what you were seeing in the past was the personal devices all but went away in the middle once school started, essentially. And so what we've seen is that's kind of smoothed out a little bit, but I couldn't give you a figure for what the extent of the smoothing is, but we could get that for you. We just take a sample.
Go ahead. And I appreciate that you don't have the data today, and we'll get that in the future. But I think that answers my question. It gives me a little bit more of a warm feeling just to know that, you know, at 9 o'clock things aren't shut down.
Yes.
The policy anecdotally seems to be working, and we'll see that data moving forward. And I think the policy that we put in place and having those access points, it really leads to that 21st century kind of model of learning that we want to instill within our kids. And you know, the creativity aspect, you know, let's let kids determine how they best get their information. I mean, I think we're making sure that we teach the kids on the right places to look for information, but they have access to it. That's the key piece. And then the collaboration. I mean, I think there's an opportunity for kids to collaborate with students in other schools, students in their own class, and teachers for that matter. And I think those are two critical C's within the 4C model of 21st century education that I think what we've done is ensured that they have that capability and the ability to be able to use those tools to their best. So I'm happy with the direction that we're moving in, and I think it's something really that a lot of other boards do shy away from, only out of the fear of the unknown. And I think we've dispelled some of those fears, and we're able to make sure that we have the best environment for our students and our staff.
Trustee Swan?
Through you, Chair. The numbers of people using devices that are not enrolled is approximately 30% of total devices. And I'm just wondering, are we doing anything to support the students in the elementary panel enroll their devices?
Jeremy?
Mr. Chair, that's a great question. You know, again, just to take a little liberty here, one of the things that's been interesting about offering students email service and offering them this enrollment service is, as an IT department particularly, we've never really had the means to talk to students directly. You've always sort of been sending them a message through somebody else. And that's kind of opened the question around, how do we talk to students? And how do we let them know these things are happening, even though their teacher may not want to tell them about it, or it just may not be important to their teacher at the time. So, you know, it's we've actually struggled a little bit with, you know, you don't send a memo to a 4-year-old student or a grade 4 student, as an example, but we have been actually using the email service. So one of our strategies with it when we rolled out the email service is we make it the student's homepage when they log into a board computer, so we can control that. So they open to their mailbox, and then we have some control over what mail messages get to the top. So one of the ways we go at it is just by trying to do age-appropriate, friendly messages to show them how to do this thing. The other thing we've been trying to work on is we've been, especially now, laying out a bit more of a campaign for marketing our services. So taking a stance that's a little bit less corporate, and instead of sort of saying, teachers, here's the memo, go instruct your kids, taking opportunities like the Small School Summit, NavCan, other venues to sell people on the capabilities that you get, rather than just sort of saying, here's how you enroll your student. We're trying to go at the why. So here's why. Here's what the capabilities that the kids will have. And then sort of sell the teachers on it there. But working through the Student Senate as an example for older kids, but it really is, it's really a challenge. It's probably, I mean, it's been just a real challenge figuring out how you get to that group, and it's a testament to the fact that we don't do that kind of work very often, right?
Go ahead, Trustee Swan.
Supplemental. And I guess the second part of that, and I think this is a really important piece of the puzzle, is how are we communicating to the parents of both panels of students that these services are available, what is available to their children, what are they seeing, are we doing anything there other than?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, what we try and do is we try and sort of let the schools take the lead on that subject. And so I think, as it's been with the larger BYOD policy, it's been a rather open-ended policy, and we leave it a little bit to the schools to set the pace in terms of what they do in the school and what the school philosophy is. So in some cases, I get asked to come to the school and speak to the staff and tell them about some of the capabilities. In some cases, I think, Carol, I've been out to one of your schools to speak to parents about some of the capabilities. I've got, like I said, we take opportunities that we can just to educate people that this is there. I mean, it's really funny, even my own daughter last week had a project to work on with a friend of hers, and they were all distressed because they had to find the same place and same time to work on it together. And I said, you know, I got all these services, I work all day to put these services in where you can talk to each other, video chat at home, and she's not even, you know, you have to remind her. So I think like what we've settled into is you're not going to get a win overnight where you get 100% adoption. It's a bit of a campaign. And when you see things like some of the Aboriginal Ed activities that have been going on, I think you and McIntosh commented a week or so ago, there were 400 kids online at an Aboriginal Ed event using the Link video service. Those are things that just build awareness. And again, when you stitch together all our initiatives in the IT department, like this MDM kind of mobile device management solution, if I want kids to know they have Link, that solution allows me to push the link application and configure it for them out to their phone so that it's just there. So the real challenge for us is, as we've said with the IT department, is this enrollment thing is, if I can just get the kids enrolled and I make it so easy that a kindergarten student can do it by themselves without teacher intervention or without a manual, or and that's really what our point of refinement is, just to get that one hurdle, and then I can get to them, right? So I'd like to have a more pat answer for you, but it really is a campaign where you're just taking advantage of opportunities and interest as it presents itself, and you couple it with tweeting and sending the odd memo out and putting posters out and that kind of thing to raise awareness, and hopefully people will ask.
Any other trustee McPherson, did I see your hand up? No? Anybody else? Okay, good. Thank you very much, Mr. Hobbs. Appreciate that. All right, now move on to just a little update on the item we discussed at last meeting, responsibility for student safety during events. After the board meeting, I had the opportunity to meet with Tyler and his group at the Student Senate, and I thought we had a very responsible, good meeting. It was interesting to, obviously many of these students are organizing their prom, so there was some eyebrows raised, and but I thought there was overall general understanding of where the board was coming from, and there were a couple of messages that I'd like to share with you. One of which was that there was a sense that they wanted to know that everybody was going to be treated the same, whether it was school to school or even within schools. That what would be disappointing is if they found out that one school had implemented it, and then down the road there was maybe a continuation of past practice. Then with even in the school, one of the students spoke from their personal experience and said that with the activity of breathalyzing students, they said that their view of what was fair and their peers' view of what was fair was that if you're going to go down that route, that you breathalyze every student rather than establishing some sort of criteria. Which I thought was interesting. It wasn't what I expected, but I understood their logic, and it was followed with that every student needs to know that, and that it needs to be clearly communicated on tickets and whatever, so that whoever shows up would know that this was going to be the pattern. And then there was another comment. A young woman from a school spoke up and said, what about those schools that don't have proms? Why don't we get a safe prom, is how she characterized it. And so I asked, and at that meeting there were 3 schools identified that did not have proms. And I thought, well, that's a fair question, but I was interested how she made the connection that, why don't I have the right to have a safe prom? So obviously the students could see that our attempt was to provide a safe environment for them to have a prom or to have a dance. So I thought that was interesting. I then had an opportunity with one of my schools who are in the midst of organizing their prom, and some parents had heard that it had been communicated by one of my principals that they were going to move to much tighter control on alcohol at the prom, and some parents had become concerned, and so we met with them, and again their feeling was echoed by the students that if we were going to go down this route, that they thought that it was far fairer to ensure that every child or every attendee was was breathalyzed, and their concern was on the practical. Now, how are you going to ensure that you can do that and not have kids standing outside for 2 hours while they go through this process? So it gave us some work to do, and certainly the principal to figure out how this would transpire. But I think that it's obviously something that's going to take some shared knowledge, I think, to make it effective. And they too said that they were very concerned. They didn't want to have a sense that one school was following this, but not all. So we'll have to, some effort to make sure that our policy is being observed by all, and so that there is that sense of fairness. Any comments or questions? Oh, and I spoke to David about the schools that identified without proms, not having proms, and he was going to talk to those schools.
I have had a couple of conversations, but I think the board should know that the stance has created some difficulty in our communities. And there's a lot of discussion going on in each of your communities about this. And some of the, I think the difficulties are with the parents and some of the kids and their interpretation of fun and so forth, and how we have fun. In fact, to let you know, we have a couple schools that the kids have said they're not coming. They've just told the principal they might as well cancel it. So as I go to talk to I've had a couple other schools say that it looks like we're going to lose ours because the kids aren't going to show up. And I think what we continue to have to do is have really good learning conversations about safety and risk. And I know that I joined you at the student trustee meeting that Tyler chaired exceptionally well, is that the kids want to be treated fairly from one end of the board to the other as you go through. But I think we have a great deal of education with parents. As we have parents saying, well, we'll do the alternative, we're going to rent a big tent in our backyard and they can all come over to our place. And I've got principals now saying, what do we do, David? I said, just make sure the parents understand that checking their insurance policy after an event when there's an accident is the wrong time to check your insurance policy. And to be very, very clear that our police services will highly frown on a backyard or a field party where potentially where parents have provided alcohol to students underage as we go through. So I think we have more discussions going on out there. I think we've raised an issue. And Tyler may remember my biggest issue, and I share and totally in support of this, both privately and publicly, and you know that, is the whole education of risk management. I go back to, we may have the kids at the school, that may be the safest place, no doubt, but we know that we have a history of, in Eastern Ontario, field parties and things of that nature, and this is sometimes one of the places where we don't have the authority and the character of our board that will show up the right way. So I think we have more work to do. I think we have more conversations to hold, just like the ones we held with our students. I'm hoping that principals will have engaging conversations, particularly with their senior students, about better alternatives. So I don't have a great report because I have talked to the schools that you raised with me, but the fact is we have a couple others because they may be pulling out because they may not have the students have said they're not going to attend.
And when I met with these parents, the thinking was that the parents were going to come with the idea that they were going to run this event at this particular school, and they had contacted their own lawyers before they got there, and not one of them was interested in running the event on their own. That once their lawyer had explained the risk and what they'd be taking on, and it was, as the conversation went on, I didn't leave that in this particular case with the sense that that they didn't want to have the prom. So I think that the conversation is going to be really important. And personally, I've said to my high school that's in the middle of this right now that I would run the prom if there's 5 kids, 10 kids, and I think that would be that's the way I'd like to see it handled. But every school will have to make its own. Go ahead, Trustee Richards.
we keep talking about prom. I would think that this is for every school dance
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's not just like there's semi-formals, there's dances at the first of the year all through, and I just keep hearing prom. So I hope that we're going to make sure that this is happening at every dance gathering at the schools.
Yeah, for sure. Trustee McMillan, First Vice McMillan.
Through you, Chair, I am glad you said that. I think it's so important that our students and our parents, our communities know that we value the prom, for an example, as a celebration. The end of one road or the end of one journey and the beginning of another. There's no question it's a huge celebration for these kids. And it's the last thing we want to do is deny them the right to celebrate a huge accomplishment in their life. But we want them to celebrate it safely. And whether or not we can change culture, that's a long time down that road. But as I've said before, we need to ensure that our students are safe at any dance or any function. And, I'm probably the last guy that'll cut to the chase, but the bottom line is all of our students are underage and they are not legally in a position to be drinking. Let's leave everything else out of the equation. It's against the law to be doing what they're doing. But more importantly, I think it's so important that the message gets out that we value these dances as a celebration, not only the prom, but all of these dances. There's so much that goes on that is a celebration. And I just believe that it is our responsibility that these celebrations are safe. But there certainly has to be a lot of conversations, there's no question. But I think it's important that people know we still value, and we're not trying to deny them the right to celebrate.
Trustee McPherson?
Just a question, and I'll admit it's been a few years since I've been to a prom. Is it strictly the responsibility of the organizers or of the school to provide the security, so to speak, as the students are coming in? Like, my flashback involved uniformed firemen or police officers. Somebody update me on what a modern prom looks like, although I'm sure I'm going to find out in a couple of years.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Big thing that came up with Senate was, Chair, police officers cost a lot for the dances.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Some of the schools came up with a figure of $700.
Ouch.
And it was a matter of not having a dance to have uniformed police officers there. So that definitely came up as an issue that came up with the dances. Yeah.
And I think that when talking with them, I think that that's a future conversation for us to have, because they said that frequently when they were organizing a dance, if they didn't think they were going to sell enough tickets to cover just the basic cost, they were canceling them. And I think as a board, maybe we need to think about that, and because I think that in many areas it's the only social opportunity that kids have. And I'd hate to think that the cost of policing them was detracting or causing dances not to occur. So I think that once I think schools get a handle on what it's going to take to ensure that our policies are followed. No, that's not really what I mean. I think once we get to the point where we understand what's going to be involved to make this change with our communities, then I think we as a board might have to sit down and think maybe there's a way we can support schools in whether it's helping with the costs or whatever. Maybe that's something that we want to think about doing, because certainly that was raised as a concern by the students. So you get 2 policemen for $700. Trustee McAllister?
I certainly agree with what you say in terms of the board providing support, and we have to support our principals, our staff, our students, and our parents. And if we don't take the lead, then nobody will.
Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. I think we've made the statement. We've indicated how we believe we should proceed. from a duty of care situation. You know, we're an occupier. We're having an event conducted within our building, and not all of these individuals coming into the building are students that go to that particular school. They could be going to another board for that matter. They have an opportunity to attend our building, so we need to make sure we protect those individuals and our students as well. But I think what we're missing, and I come back to some of the other things, is that piece to make sure that it is being used in an equitable fashion, that if one school is looking at it and applying the you know, the piece that we've put forward and said that this is the way it needs to be conducted, how do we ensure that the school down the road, and in fact the school on the other side of the board, is conducting it in the same manner, and that there is not something that's being done differently, so that there is that level of unfairness to students based on geography, for the simple fact that schools are based on geography. How do we get to that point? How do we have an understanding that it is being applied in that same level?
Director?
Through the chair, Trustee McDonald, we've got to out early in advance. This isn't something like on the Victoria Day weekend we pulled out. I think the board should be commended to getting ahead of this, particularly the fact that we were able to, I think, have quite a responsive conversation with our student trustees, and that was very interesting. And although it was a candid conversation, I don't think they pulled their punches. They said as you said, David, that they want the equity in how we deal with this and push it out. Spoke with the chair, and what I intend to do is have a call in, put all the principals, our secondary principals, into a discussion where we're at. I know they're watching this very closely because I've been talking with them, and I think they're asking some really good questions, and they're engaging in several of our schools, their school councils and their student councils and their student government in being a part of this. And that's created, I'm trying to find a better word for ruckus, because it really has created some, you know, why you're trying to, is this the board that doesn't have any fun board and stuff like that? And only the adults and teachers can have fun. And I think we have to really, again, as we spoke frankly and openly, in a caring manner, as Vice Chair McMillan says, that this is about avoiding accidents. This is about the fact that our board has faced other tragedies when we haven't examined this correctly, and that if we know we can prevent an accident, then we should do everything we can. We won't be absolute. I don't think any one of us can think we're going to be 100% on something, but we're going to spend a great deal of time with our communications. We also, with the communications department, have a campaign that's going to go out to the broader public, so the broader public supports this. And I think that they will get it. At the end of the day, and you've been around a while, 100% compliance, I'd be foolish to say I think we're going to nail it right down, but we're going to do the very best we can. And in fact, the chair is committed to attending a sort of revolving meeting with me where I pull all the principals together for a sort of eyeball and get everybody on this one. But I will say this, I think they are listening to what the board is doing. They're watching this closely.
Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. I think that's an important piece from a rollout standpoint. However, we know that we advance people in their positions as teachers into principals on a regular basis. So I think we need to make sure that we have a process in place that, you know, part of your function, part of your role as a principal in predominantly a secondary school, it's a common issue. It's a common understanding of how we're doing that. So from an initial kickoff, I guess the information that you're providing captures that and makes sure that we have that information available. But it is open to interpretation. I think that's the difficulty. If we've communicated verbally and we provide something in writing, there is various ways that individuals can interpret it. So I guess in order to make sure that that is fair across the board, perhaps we need to look at a standardized procedure, not at the board level, but at administration level. You touch the procedure, we'll touch the policy, to make sure that it is followed in an equal way across one school to the next. And I think that would also allow new individuals coming into the position to be clear on how that function is rolled out if they are to have a dance at the school, if it pertains to prom. you know, I think it's making sure that we have fun in that, as someone said, in the safe, caring environment, but we need to make sure that it's not just this year. It's September, it's 2 years from now, it's moving forward, because if we don't embed that and making sure that we have that standardized process in place, we could be in a situation where people have forgotten about it.
As Trustee Richards said, I think that this is a cultural issue of change, and it's not just prom. You and I believe Trustee Buckman was with us when we had the first, I think it will be an annual football event. I walked the sidelines of every part of the field, and I thought the kids were extremely respectful. I saw many parents there as well. I guess what we're saying is at our events, we're going to be really working at this. But I think this is a cultural change, and I think we're going to not only have to communicate effectively with our staff, our principals, and the people who work with us, but this is going to be a real cultural change for some of our parents too, and as we go through. And that's one of the things we did talk about at the student trustees as well, is that I think we've drawn a line in the sand, and now we've got to really do a good job of communicating effectively. One of the things we're going to do with the communication part as well, because we know that this is not a one-off, this is a standard, a permanent stance of the board, and to build capacity, we're going to videotape one of our dances, and we're going to do that with the skill we have now in the communications department, and sort of create policy by this is the standard you should be looking for, and we're hoping that that will be quite meaningful, and we're going to do that this year, and we think we can do a good job of it, because I think in some of these cases, as you said so correctly, there'll be lots of different interpretation. We're hoping that with almost like a referee's presentation on this is high sticking, this is not, what we want to do is create a policy that is understood by all.
Yep. Go ahead, Mr.
And just to follow up, I mean, to address the culture piece, you know, I don't disagree. I completely agree. I can recall a time when I was in school and friends of mine would go out for lunch and come back and somehow or another be quite giddy.
Just imagine to happen, eh?
Yeah. And it's, I think it's very clear that that's not acceptable, and it hasn't been acceptable, and that's, you know, moved away. What we need to make sure that our students and our parents understand is just because the sun goes down doesn't mean it's acceptable. It's our facility, it's our events, and whether there's instruction going on or not, we still expect the same.
I think, you know, we've noticed, we've had some reports of some interesting comments on Facebook and other and social media made by students in reaction to this. And I think the important thing is, and one of the points that I made with the parents that I think sort of changed their thinking. No one is going to sit at this table and say that events, whether school or otherwise, are going to occur from now on just because we've shined a light on it without underage drinking. What we hope is that it doesn't occur with either the community turning a blind eye or perhaps us responding to the communities. And I think that that's really the big change. I mean, kids are going to do what kids do, you know. So, you know, there were interesting comments about, you know, like how David and I, we probably never had a drink when we were going to school. And that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is are you having that drink before prom, and is that being condoned by actions that we're taking, or is it being condoned by actions that parents or the community is taking? And that's really the difference. And I hope that becomes the message. And the kids are going to rebel. That's what kids do. I get that. And that's, you know, that we have rules for that, and that'll be dealt with. But it's very different from when a society then turns the other way. And that's what I'm hoping that we start to address. Trustee Buckland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments. So, in the pre-police era, there seemed to be more attendance by by teachers at some of these events. It was more of a social thing. When the police came in, I heard say, well, the police are looking after it, so we don't need to be there as monitors. And there might have been some fall off as a result of that. So I hope that we're encouraging the teachers to attend these dances as well, because it is a very important social event, particularly in schools out in the rural area where the school is the social center, daytime. Just another point, in my brief high school teaching career, I used the football players as bouncers, and they said, okay, we are not drinking tonight, but it's going to be fun checking out some of our friends. So that there was a commitment not to drink at the school dance, and that hasn't been the case lately. So I approve of our new policy, but it is going to take some time to get it completely throughout the board.
Trustee McCray.
Through you, Chair. I think we've all alluded to the importance of education as we move forward with this policy. I know as a board we try to present things, I like to use the term good news stories. I think that in this situation, and sometimes it doesn't hurt to share stories where lives have been changed because of a situation or an event that has occurred. And I would really highly recommend that we join forces with some of these organizations, whether it be MAD or whatever the organization might be, and that we work together with them on things like our Facebook pages, sharing statistics and information on education. These agencies have a real knack for this. That's what they're in the business of doing, and promoting safety around alcohol and drugs and that type of a thing. And I just think that having them on our team would be certainly to our advantage.
Trustee McAllister.
In addition to the support that I think we have to offer our staffs, I just want to suggest strongly that we seek the active involvement and commitment and ideas of our school councils, because I think that would be an excellent representative view of the community to start with.
Trustee McPherson.
This, in a sense, is not new policy. The whole purpose is to create a new awareness of what has been an existing policy and to try to smooth out the bumps, that there's consistency between schools and across the board. Am I correct in that assumption?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Somebody's nodding, so I'll take that as a yes.
Trustee Carkner.
Chair, is there going to be any more communication come out from you to the media on this issue, or just the original?
At this point, there's no further plan, but I put it on the agenda with hopes that we would encourage some more discussion. So I'm hoping that. You know, I think that they're. Yeah, at this point I don't have, but David did mention to me, or the communication team mentioned to me this idea they have about doing a video, and so we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and I think that there's an opportunity there to use the kids to tell the story too. What were you thinking? Did you have some?
Just a comment you made earlier, a few comments about, you know, we know kids are kids and what they'll test the system as much as they can. You came out with a statement about changing the mindset of the parents and that and so on and so forth. I thought that needs to be said over and over again, because we're not the bad guys taking away the alcohol from the students. they're underage, it's against the law. We just have to keep pressing that point.
Yeah.
And the fact that a lawyer has said something to those parents that stay away from that perhaps needs to be shared from our own lawyer.
Yeah, and we did get legal and supplied that to principals. Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I want to take a bit of a liberty perhaps. It's unlike me, I know, but
You ready to turn the mics off?
I don't think so.
we have a review of some of the high-risk policies that's coming forward in May. Is it possible that, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Director, is it possible that we could include this? For all intents and purposes, we have the top 10 coming to us, but perhaps we can include that in that framework and make sure that we have some understanding of how that will be monitored.
Barclay's taking notes right now.
I'm not sure if the rest of the trustees feel that's appropriate or not, but I'll
take that as direction through you, Chair.
Okay. Yep. Anything else? Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Move on now to the next item. This is big item here. I think that what we're about to embark on, what David's going to lay out, I think is it's part of a vision that this board has been championing for a long while, and I'm very pleased to finally see it come to the board and be presented. So, trustees, David has a lot of slides, and he's already been billed for the extra slides. But I think that you're going to get paper copies, and we'll let him finish the report, and then go back and pick up any questions that you have, which is normally what we do. So you're getting paper copies of all the slides at this point. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Peterman. Thank you for the liberty that you've given me. I appreciate that. Because sometimes you have a short leash and you tug on it over here. But this is a comprehensive look at the future. I would like to, first of all, thank the trustees for their commitment to this process. I have met with all of you, several of you on a number of occasions. I've met several of you with leadership officials in your communities, and those people have shaped this report. As the chair has said, this is something I've been thinking about for over 18 months, and when I was asked to respond to potentially the issues of Ontario and in fact North America, what you see is a response in front of you. I'd like to thank the Communications Department and for their work on this. I'd like to thank my executive assistant, Rhonda, who is learning sometimes I want something yesterday. It meant really yesterday, and she has worked very, very hard, and I publicly like to thank her. And every executive assistant ever worked for me, because sometimes I say, oh my God, what are you going to ask me to do right now? To get right to the issues right now, I'd like to draw your attention to the front, 2020 and then next level driven. It's something that we have been talking about casually, and you're going to see it more formal here. But I'd like to bring to your attention three of my friends. The picture you see in the front are three students from Montague. Well, you may recognize them, but not now. They're in grade 6 and 7 now. Austin's at the back, and he is a farmer's son, and he loves, and he's an interesting young man because he is a John Deere man. Whatever that means. I'm a city boy, and Bill knows that. But he's John Deere, and he's got a John Deere shirt on, he's got a John Deere lunchbox, but now he's grown up, he's in grade 6. He's still a John Deere guy, he's just a little more sophisticated. He has a cap that he wears. Abigail is in the pink, and she's in grade 7. And she's a really neat kid. She's, I would say, a really gifted young lady, very, very bright, and her challenges sometimes are her brightness. And finally, Julie. You see Julie is a really neat little young girl who speaks quietly and softly, but she's a fabulous young lady. The reason why I bring your attention, I've been meeting with them once, twice, sometimes 3 times a year, because that's our class of 2020. These kids have been my benchmark about what we're doing, and I followed them very closely as a group of our kids to say, are we making a difference? And I know them well. In fact, Austin, who's gotten much bigger, the last time I visited him and visited the school, his moms and dads, his grandmother came to meet me, and as I was leaving, I had a tender moment with him. He ran down the hall and hugged me. It was just I haven't seen you in a while, probably won't see you until next year, and he hugged me. It was really, as Terry Davis knows, the first time we met with him, we could hardly get a word out of him, and it was really interesting to watch the relationship that we developed. That's our kids. Those are kids in our system. Those are the thousands of young people that we're trying to make a difference of. They become my touchstone, but I think, are we making a difference? And they are fabulous young people. And their parents really care about the relationship they have in their school. They care about where they're going, and they really support public education. They're really good people. I think one of the most important things when you go through a significant change like this, this is not an aggressive move. It's bold, but it's not aggressive because it's been well thought out, and we're very, very ready for it. This board of trustees, and this is not pandering, and I say this because I've worked with many trustees, and I attend all the many meetings that you have with you at places. This is one of the most focused board of trustees I've ever seen on the issue of student welfare. You just heard it. You guys debated something, I would dare say, I'm not sure many boards across Ontario are talking about, with the passion that you've shared. The welfare of our students, we don't want to see an accident. We don't want to see someone who could have been saved by us honoring our policy and making good decisions with governance. We also are singularly focused on student achievement, and we keep that very, very important. And we also, the well-being of our staff and our community is highly important. This has set us up, I think, in a way to make the next move to the next level. And so, as we refocus and commit to the moral duty of doing the best we possibly can, I remind you of one of those quiet moments that Trustee McDonald had. That David challenged us one day here, and challenged the senior team about 2 years ago, that all means all. You can't write a kid off. And furthermore, he said something very interesting that day, was that we have the privilege of having all the kids come to our school. We have a wide open door for every single child, every single student, even adult students, to choose our brand, to choose what we do. And that is an awesome challenge, and I think it's a great thing to have. So, although there'll be some subtlety to what I have to say tonight, this is a powerful, bold move that puts kids first. And with the permission of the chair, I'd like to make the presentation from the other end of the room so that I can be a teacher, because I love being a teacher.
Get used to this, we can just keep them down there.
Oh, that was sort of lacking character, wasn't it? I just wanted to see if these guys were watching the hockey game, because my mother, who watches from London, Ontario, she goes, Ted was watching the basketball game. Were you aware of that, David? And I said, well, maybe I was going on too long. You found something more interesting to take a look at. What I'd like to bring your attention to is the second slide that's coming up. I have, if you were wondering what I've been doing for the last 4 months, there it is. And you know I've spent, you talked to my wife, many, many evenings traveling across eastern Ontario and parts of Ontario to talk to people about education and how we can dynamically serve the students and the community of eastern Ontario. And so you recognize the names. In fact, I have probably missed the odd name, but in my conversations, you may remember I took lengthy notes. I would like to turn my laptop on and do that, but there were several places where I couldn't plug in properly, and so I didn't do that. I actually had copious handwritten notes that I shared with Rhonda, and Rhonda typed them up for me as we go through. A bit old school, but it was very interesting. Please note that I've got a couple of hospital executives I've met with different people, and they have shared their concerns for Eastern Ontario with me in education. And finally, I met with a series of directors, some who heard about what we were thinking about doing, and others because they're contiguous, their boards are geographically touch our boards, and I wanted to let them know what we were thinking about what we're doing. I'd like to thank my senior team. They've been patient through this. When you're talking about lives, when you're talking about changing things, it's human. And I know that they've been on pins and needles as you go through. I've had a couple of sleepless nights as well, but they have been professional throughout, and I'm very, very proud of them as we go through. So moving to the next slide, you'll see this is really, as again I said, subtle, but it's a paradigm shift. And Trustee McRae may recognize some of her conversation with me. It'll go a little further, but the triangle in front is really about taking, as she said to me at a truck stop, that's as good as our date was that, David, it's about the senior people serving the entire system. It's not about a system where everyone serves Fort Fumble. And I know I lovingly call this place where I work Fort Fumble, but we are moving to, with service education, service management, is realizing our job is to serve the system so they can meet the needs of our thousands of students we go through. And thank you, Lisa, for moving forward. This was one of the conversations, interesting, the conversation I had with Trustee McRae, because that was, that conversation was duplicated in many other truck stops and places where I met people. That is the typical leadership model, whether you're talking about a board of education, maybe even some private corporations. I know that probably Charlotte, who works in a hospital board, would probably recognize that for hospitals. But the fact is, as I talked to the group, this top-down sort of directed way to do business, we have to have it for compliance on issues of policy and procedure, but I'm not so sure it's always the best way to educate our kids or get the very best energy out of our system. So what I have, and I think, again, you'll recognize this from the napkins we drew on, so forth, our next slide, is that this is exactly, I believe, and I've captured, hopefully, Trustee McRae, the intent of your conversation with me, which again was captured by several other people. This is now a reshaping of our organization to serve and energize the base, to recognize that everyone in the organization should be working at our most important stakeholder, and that's our students. And what we're going to try and do and reculture an organization where we're not serving the principal, we're not serving the director, we don't serve the board of trustees. What we really do is serve the most important stakeholder, Abigail, Austin, and Julie, as you go through. As we take a look at the next slide, I share with you a concern that I've had for probably close to 3 years, and I want to take a look at this with you. And this may be the teacher in me, and you may have a test later, John, so I hope that you're taking copious notes. If this line is performance, high performance here, and this line across here is time. It's been said by Cotter, some of the best workers, Collins and so forth. If you take a look at that, is that you will have different types of cycles in an organization. But if you track it over time, let's say that this is 2001, and this is 2014, you'll see the fact that the organization, when amalgamated, it actually had a dip and went down, and about 2003, they leveled off. You look at the performances as measured by the standard, and then we had a serious increase here. But what's happened, the province also had that, and you'll see that in some of my slides. And what's happened over the last couple of years, we've been making progress, but the fact is we're right here. I call it a stall. I think that if we don't come out of the stall, it would be called a plateau. And I think that when you take a look at organizations, it's leadership that deals with the stall. In the slide you see up in front of you right now, looking at an organization that potentially has had a stall and maybe in decline. When you see that, what happens is you have a strategic revelation, and often some of the first group to get this are the middle management people who see what's going on and what's happening. And I think when you look at the organization, your principals will tell you, your middle people in the organization will say, you know, this, we have leveled off or whatever. And after the revelation, you have a reaction, and you have 3 types of reactions: fight, flight. You may even have a group that freezes. You may also have a group that simply appeases and passively denies what's going on. Then you have a moment of reflection, and in a good organization, a deep reflection, and what you begin to reshape and reframe the issues that you're in, and then you come up with a plan and you respond to it. That's what we're doing today. We're responding to it, reframing it, and moving forward, and we're actually, to use another metaphor, we're going to pull the trigger and release and do something really fabulous and have results that we think our community wants from us, they want from our teachers, they want from our schools, they want from us. On our next slide, I'm going to take you through the next, I think what it'll look like for the next 3 years. We have engaged in powerful conversations across Eastern Ontario, and in fact, right across Ontario. And we're now at the final stages here, April 23rd, where we have something for you to take a look at that we're going to do, and we think it's going to help us respond to this stall, not the plateau that I'm concerned about. And I think most of us who are following the rich data and evidence across North America, we know not only have we had a stall or a pause in our math results, but across North America, we really have to deal with it as we go through. And it's not going to happen by doing the same thing as we take a look at. So we're doing this today. I believe what we should be doing by probably the end of May. We'll have the 45 days to really get this together, to get the people in the right seats of the bus and get the thing organized. Then we've got to get at the actual work of being innovative and driving the change. Our next slide is a bit of a metaphor for you, and you take a look at it. If you're watching me get out of my car right now, and I've got a nice Pathfinder out there, often Jeremy leaves nasty notes on the side in the dirt from. But right now, my door doesn't work on the driver's side. And I wind the window down, I pull it from the outside. At first, because I'm so technical and the wizard I am, I didn't know that I sort of thought the whole door wasn't working, and I climbed up over the passenger side until my very talented wife said, why don't you wind the window down and open it from the outside? That's a good idea. And so an innovative thing I brought to my car now is I wind the window down and open it from the outside. The reason why I bring that to you is that maybe I was sort of stuck in a previous paradigm where the wizard style that I do with technology really was displaying. But I find that and opening up a parachute are really easy to do, but opening up a closed mind is very difficult to do. When you have a closed mind to stuff, you climb up over the seat and go out the passenger side. But when you finally wake up and open your mind, you grow and become better. The next slide as a challenge is we're going to build a new system architecture, and that is really going to be transformational, where the power and the authority of the organization is distributed in the school where we think it'll have the biggest impact. And changing this will be taking a look at the status quo, as I call it, the stall. On the next sheet that you'll see is perhaps the dynamic, subtle nature of this. And I appreciate the support I've had from Ian, but in the top box, it's not really about the top box at all. In fact, as I spoke with Ian yesterday in our conversation, our job will be to lead. Our job will be available, out there, and connecting in our schools as many possible days as we can, being recognized as people that are there to support the principals and the staff who we want to make these changes, to make the connections. As you see, the senior table has gotten smaller through retirement and some other things that I'm working on. But the fact is, some people might conclude from that, as we had in many of our conversations, that this is about saving money. It is not. In fact, I have not costed this in any sort of manner to say, will we save money for 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years? And similar to the efforts of a previous board that was courageous when we were closing a number of schools that were underutilized, we did not throw the first thing out there that this was to save money. At the time, the chair of the board said this is about effective schools. It's not about the school itself, it's about schooling. And the schoolhouse took on a very different shape for this organization. So although it may appear to some that we're sort of leveling off, and some people may join in quickly and say, we think that will bring savings, that is not the energy, nor the intention, nor the power of this particular change. It's really about the big box that you see on the other side. We are going to create 10 families of schools that are already technically families of schools. They work together, they're geographically aligned, and inside that family of schools, we're going to create a position called the Coordinating Administrative Principal. He, she, and we have many talented people who will be able to take on this job. They're going to do the work of ensuring that the messages of our board, the messages of our senior table, the messages of Ontario curriculum, the pedagogical practices that are up to speed are shared in a timely manner at the meetings they already attend. You see, they attend superintendent's meetings. They attend meetings all the time. Now with those specific people who we're going to identify in a process to hire is to recognize you're already at the meeting. We'd like you to chair it, organize it, and make a deep connection to Ian, myself, and David Coombs onto where they're going and as they go through. And one of the most important things will be is to create a culture where they attend to each other's needs and they attend to the agenda of the board. The next slide, and as I said this to you earlier, I think that you have carved out as a group of trustees through your governance style, and what you've done is that unquestionably you've been focused on student achievement. This is, I believe, the board legacy as we go through and take a look at this. I think, however, let's be really true on this one. Thank you. We'll go to the next one. Thanks, Lisa. It's natural to be suspicious of change, and if you weren't, it wouldn't be human. And I think that our system is going to take a look at this and say, is it for real? Is it going to work? And I think that if they're not suspicious, they're not a human being. But the fact is, a strong mandate from this organization, from our trustees and our senior team, and the proof in our work and how we conduct ourselves will be critical. It's natural to be suspicious, but we still have to change. And we have to change for a number of reasons. What I'd like to share with you, in your package you'll see a couple of slides. I have a concern, what caused me my unrest over the last couple of years, and when you look at our budgets, again, if we call this money, and we call this time over here, and let's call it measured by student, we had about $7,000 per student in 2003, and today, and in between, a steady climb as this government supported the issues of the day, that if we invest in public education, we'll have a stronger and better democracy. The other piece that was interesting, and you have to be aware of this, not only did they make a huge investment in public education as you go through, but we had, again, if this is time down here, and we have average classrooms over here, we have literally from class averages of, I'm looking around the room, several of us taught about the same time. My first class I ever taught was 33, my second was 36. I was really blessed one year with 27, but the fact is over the last several years, we have gone down, you take a look at it, we have literally gone down from 27 and 30, but we're at the point now we're in 16 and 15, that type of situation. But sadly, what's happened, there was a belief that if we made it smaller, we put more money into it, results would go up. And there was a pop, there's no doubt about it. I think that there were effective things that happened in our smaller classes. But what's happened is, while that was going on, we had this growth, and while we have the smallest classes and the most money ever in the history of public education in this province, we have leveled off, and some would say, in fact, we've declined. Now, we've had a great growth. You've got to say to yourself, we've gone up 20%. As you take a look at the numbers, and you take a look at the province, our graduation rate has gone up from 67 to near 83, 84%. These are very important things we should celebrate. But the fact is we have stalled, we have plateaued. But I want it to be a stall, not a plateau. So I share that with you because these are the things that were keeping me awake at night as we go through. And so as I've shared with you, we'll move to the next slide. Is that we're going to have to, with our teachers and our staffs, expose ourselves to people who will really challenge us on thinking differently and what the future should look like. It was said that pigs can't fly. And this is to show Jeremy and David and some of our other wizard people that I do pay attention. Back about 15 years ago, Dell created a situation where you could go online and order your computer and said people would never do it. They've got to go to a store. Well, needless to say, not only did Dell deliver, but they put this thing on the market and they made everybody else follow as you go through. So actually pigs can fly, so we can do something interesting. But on the next slide, I'd like to share with you something very important. Take a look at each of those companies. Boy, there's some loyal Pontiac drivers. I worked at the A&P. It was interesting when the A&P was bought by Dominion, etc. I remember Wayne Computers. I think I had one. I'm not sure about it. And I think BlackBerry's doing everything it can not to die. But Eaton's has some beautiful buildings. I was in one it's still called the Eaton Center, but the Eaton's hasn't been there for 20 years as we go through. Recently, there was a speaker I was listening to who talked and started the group off. He said, recently in history, an international speaker came into Oklahoma, and every single manager, every senior vice president, every regional manager was called to Oklahoma into this meeting. And the international speaker said, you guys have to be proud of what you've done. Your stores in North America sell more things than all the other stores combined. They said, last year, your stores sold more, get this, more lawnmowers than all the lawnmower stores combined across North America. And then they said, not only that, you sold more bed linen than any other store across North America. Well, what store do you think they were talking about? Who was pulled together for that? No, Sears, 1971. Walmart's had similar types of meetings, and I think if we don't pay attention to change, then change actually comes up and can bite you really, really hard. So this is about change and a response to change. My job for you as director is to resist the urge to do something the easy way. You want me to be transparent and do everything necessary, everything I possibly can, to let everyone know what's going on and what's going to happen today. We're making some changes. And what I'm really proud of in my many years at the senior table, some boards of education would put these types of things off. I'm not sure of anyone who would dare, any board that would dare to say, well, we're going to talk about it in the spring, and we're going to have it all in place for September. I believe we can change. I believe we've proved that we can do these changes, and that we have a resilient group of people who will make the decisions properly in the field and at the board office to support the learners in our system. Next slide, thanks. First of all, I agree. I think people have said it's relevant. It has to be relevant and meaningful. And I think as we prove our case here, and I don't think you can argue with the evidence or the data, that we've got to do something. And I don't think anyone in this room wants a plateau, and certainly not a decline of any kind. And I think we want to continue to be a board by which others are measured, not by how we feel about the board, but how our students are performing. We also understand the early adapters to change are clearly the ones who win, but the early adapters in our particular case have to share the common vision. They have to have a mission that's deeply filled with commitment to students. And I'm going back to something that has almost become the unofficial mission statement of the senior team is, and we say it and we hear it all the time, does this mean all means all? Will this fit for all of the kids? And when you work that particular way, it means you can't leave anyone behind, and you can have no roadkill or damage. That every single child's future is in our hands, and we take it very seriously. Next slide. As I met with the senior team and I had interesting discussions with all of them, I said to them, what should I be most frightened of going through this one, and what should the board be leery of? And Tim said to me, pressure is a privilege. Now, I'm not sure where he got it from. He didn't tell me where the quote. And he said, we are not entitled to anything. People are more resilient than you think, David. Go at it straight up. Give people credit for that they can do this. And it was a timely point, because that particular time in February was a cold day, and winter just would not come to a conclusion. And it was good to get that encouragement. I'd also publicly like to thank the many people in this room as I was going through this, hours and hours of work and travel, and the encouragement I got from several places. And John, I'd like to thank you for your kind words and notes along the way that were well received, and many of you did it, but thanks very much for that as we met. The next thing that we heard, and Charlotte said this, but certainly I think she stole it from Chair Peters. Well, did you? You baby. It was the other way around. Craig stole it from Charlotte. Both of them said to me that the focus of this change has to be at the place that will have the greatest impact. And if we think focusing the change here and reshuffling the chairs and organizing the seats where people sit, that may be neat and so forth and as we go through, but it was not going to have the desired impact. And I think the direction was get it at the school site, get it at the classroom, and make the message be that we've got to do things differently to get to every single student. The next slide is going to, I think, be very important for you to take a look at. That's our team. That's the men and women who serve you as principals and vice principals in our system. There's a couple missing because I think they're back at their school doing TPAs or something. But this group proved itself last year. I couldn't be more proud of a group. When we had an illegal strike, and it was a very difficult, awkward time in the province for everyone. I even sent a letter home to all the parents saying tomorrow will not be the usual day at school. Please, if you can do anything else, don't attend. But if you have to, we want you there. And one of the reasons why we did that was that many of us around this table know that rural poverty is horrible. And a group of kids, and if mom's got a decision, do a single mom, do I go to work or do I stay home? I lose a day's pay, and maybe the most mature 8-year-old can look after the group. We wanted to take that decision away. And so what happened was we emptied the board offices, we emptied each of our facility places, and many of us, Ian was alone here at Grand Central Station, taking phone calls and being ready to do it. But all of us were out in schools working. But the men and women who did that, they were frightened. They were afraid. We had several people that, what if 200 kids show up and it's me and an EA? Well, I said, I hope the people read, I hope our parents read the letter. And we did have. In some of our schools, we had 30 and 40 kids show up. But the fact was, I think they, not only did they do the right thing for the right reason, and this is no attack on unions. That was all a big, huge union thing in Toronto. I was a union president. I was a union negotiator. I know what we have to do. But morally, we felt very strongly that on that particular occasion, we had to put the kids' needs above our own self-interest, and we did that. And this is not to take a shot at anyone at all, but that group of people, couple quite frightened because we had our phone calls were made, many phone calls to many people, and they said, oh, David, what's tomorrow going to look like? And Chair Peters may remember, he was on the phone calls. We had people who said, is this the right thing? And at the end, we realized that not only are we going to keep our schools open, we decided to run the buses. That terrified them. But the fact is that they came through. And we're going to lean heavily. And Ian certainly speaks eloquently for himself. We understand that that's the group that we have to lead purposefully and show that we're committed and dedicated to them. Buckminster Fuller said this, and I stole this from a book called Creative Conversations as you go through. And the author had used this as a quote: you never change things by fighting the existing reality. You change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. I think it's very interesting as a board of trustees. We were, I believe, one of the first boards in North America. I know the first board in Ontario that had one of the most progressive bring your own device policies ever seen. And you heard Jeremy speak tonight that we have times when, was it 17,000? I know that one time we were on there and Jeremy thought the whole thing was going to crash. But the fact was is we made those changes and we made some practices in our schools obsolete by being bold and doing the right thing. I move you down to the next slide, and again, this is not a vision or a test for anyone, but the fact is that we've tried to balance, and I've really worked at this, to balance the work that our 10 men and women will have in leading these particular groups, but it really is for the trustee seat. What's really good about this, and this certainly heard this, Trustee Carkner and I were speaking to JP, the mayor of Russell, and what he liked about this, he was looking that he would have a person in his community that he could strongly identify with. And he said, no disrespect to Brockville, but he said having a go-to person in their community he felt was a great way to communicate. And again, I don't want to put words in JP's mouth. He was certainly articulate. What he shared with me was that he supported this sort of decentralization. and putting the authority in the communities. And he made a reference to our field usage and different things of that particular nature that principals are involved in, that he was looking to develop a good professional relationship with the persons who's identified for their community. The next slide, you may remember this, Jesse Hirsch spoke at OPSPA, and he was a very interesting young man from CBC who got up there and I think was one of the best speeches I've ever heard when he connected public education to democracy. And he said we have to be very, very careful governance decisions we make that we very well undermine through our own policies and procedures on social media and things, the very things that the men and women fought for in World War I and World War II, to say these are the freedoms that we value. And he made a very compelling case that change is important, but that the people who are changing and make relevant changes are really the champions of democracy as we move through. The next slide that you're going to take a look at is just the beginning to start to understand our roles and responsibilities. And I have to share with you, I believe in the next 45 days, as I sit down with the senior table starting tomorrow, that we're really going to start to examine how we do business and how we serve this organization, and how we're going to create the energy, the strategies that will serve the organization properly. We are committed right now, Ian and I, that we're going to do 9 days of professional development with the coordinating administrative principals. That will begin in July. The second week of July, we will have 4 important team building days and days where we're going to deal with some operational issues, procedural issues, and work with them to come together as a team. That team will be critically important. And Ian and I, as I share with you right now, are putting the pedagogical pieces together on the leadership there, and we know that probably one of the most important parts of the days spent in team building will be that in developing a really strong team that understands the service. This is just the beginning of really what we're looking for in the people who will serve us in the job description that Charlotte has organized for this. The piece that we're looking for is, and you don't see it there that says really, really great at understanding boring. By the way, curriculum isn't boring. But what we know here is that that's our work, that's our job, but one of the most important things you'll see in that particular is how we can be candid, caring, understanding, and be available for each other, and then really push the mission and agenda of our Board of Education forward. Next slide, thank you. This is one that is important to take a look at. Around this table, every one of us is going to have a number of questions. Some quite polite, because do you really know what you're doing? To, are the trustees really behind this? To, oh my goodness, will that smaller group at the senior table be able to do all the work? Well, we're going to have fight, we're going to have fright, we're going to have freeze, we're going to have some people who will passively resist this as we move through. And again, I think if we're to ignore that, it would be a mistake. And the final slide that I take you through before I take your questions, we have to raise the bar. Raise the bar for ourselves, raise the bar for. But there's an issue that we have in Ontario that we have to take a real look at, and it's certainly in our community. We have this unbelievable overarching goal of a 90% graduation rate. We have some schools that are already at it. We have some schools that are a distance from as we go through. But the fact is, when you take a look at this as we move through, and Ian, you may remember this, one of my first speeches ever here as Director of Education, Minister Kennedy was supposed to come down and speak. Well, Ian and I worked till 1:32 in the morning, and I said, Ian, that's great, he's not going to be here, I'll have an hour and a half to talk. And Ian was fairly generous then of me, and he sat and put a thing together, and it was an animated, do you remember it, Ian?
Yep.
It was just wild. And what's happened is Kennedy was talking about that we had to raise the bar in education. And we have, and we've successfully done that. And I think we say, oh, 83% is okay, 85% is okay. Not only have we raised the bar, we also know that we have a major issue, and that's the gap between the achievers and the non-achievers. We have a growing significant gap between the kids on their way over the bar and the kids who don't even want to enter the contest of jumping the bar. I think what we have to take a look at this particular model I'm sharing with you, that I believe will potentially be energetic, inspiring, creative, that not only do we have to raise the bar in our performance, we have to pull that group, the level 1s and 2s, up with us so they get the most important gift, the most important thing earned by our board, and the greatest poverty reducer in North America. That's a high school diploma. I think we're ready for it. I think the senior team is ready for it. I believe the principals are ready for it. And the question that I had from many of you in our personal visits, how many people do you think of the principals are ready to do this? Well, I sat down with a rough rubric and went through and put every single principal, vice principal in our system to, and I can say right now that we're about 73%. We have some people I'm worried about, I'll be honest. We have some principals that perhaps are afraid of the authority that they have. And we have to encourage them to be the leaders that we know they can be, and we have to link them with people who will encourage their spirit and let them become the principals and the leaders in their community that we know they can be. We're ready, and I think this is going to be an exciting time to be in education. Thank you, Chair Petersman.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Director. You're going to come back up here?
You look too comfortable there without me.
Just thinking who I was going to get to sit next to me from now on. Mr. McMillan.
Through you, Chair. Thank you very much, Director, for that presentation. I believe strongly that education can only be encouraged from the top down, but I certainly believe that improvement comes from the ground up. Because of that, I see that one of the strengths I see in your model is the family of schools and building capacity in the family of schools and leadership. I like that. I like the fact that you've got leadership and an opportunity for leaders to grow and move into potential other positions in the board. I want to ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot here, because one of our main jobs as trustees involves student achievement. I'm going to ask this question this way. How would you explain to Abigail, Julie, and Austin that this new model is going to help them with student achievement?
Director?
You told me there wouldn't be tough questions.
They put two
You got the answer.
two together.
I think first of all, Abigail, Austin, and Julie have had some really, really fine teaching, some outstanding teaching. They have a sense of purpose. I sense when I'm with them. I think one of them has had a bit of a tough time with some bullying. I think that the principal and staff have paid close attention to it. But I believe as you watch them, and because I see them in a snapshot every so often, I see their growth. And what I would say to them is that what I hope that the energy and the authority and the accountability we're asking from the principal for how she or he operates their school will have a very genuine impact on the teacher saying, I can do this, and I recognize my role to do this. And what Abigail, Julie, and Austin will see is a teacher very engaged in purposeful actions that increase their achievement levels as they go through, and I think that's going to be, I don't think it'll be easy, but I think that we're going to see it that particular way.
Trustee McCray?
Through you, Chair. I have two questions. I'd just like to elaborate a little bit further on Trustee McMillan's question. So you showed us a presentation or a slide on those that make it over the bar. I'm concerned about those that don't step up to the bar and those that haven't even considered the bar. And I would like to know again, back in this model, how is this model going to help us encourage not these three children that appear to be doing very well. I'm concerned about the ones that are struggling. How is this model going to help them?
Director?
Thank you. The model is to really take the energy and authority of this table and organize it as the conversation you and I had, is that to really, instead of us pushing it down, is for us to support it coming up. Is that when good ideas and innovative practice come, we're not be waiting for a meeting to share that. I'd like to think within the family of schools, let's take your area, Almont, Carlton Place, and you have some exceptional leaders there. I'd like to think that there would be ongoing sharing of best practice, successful practice, and good ideas, so that they don't wait till the next school year to come in, just as we're trying to do this. Well, why can't we do it now? I'd like a faster pace, quicker pace, and try things. The other thing that's going to happen with this, and we certainly saw it today at Strat Council, Marcia McNair, principal at Athens, made her presentation that you'll see in a couple of weeks here. And she was able to dig down in her data and the evidence that she was displaying, that she could almost, when she would say 83% of the kids are achieving at this level, she could tell in her school who were the 6 or 7 kids that were struggling, the 6 or 7 kids who've lost interest. And I think because of the intimacy of what she's trying to create in her plan, is that what are we doing for this boy? What are we doing for this girl? How are we connecting with the family? And I'm very confident in your area in particular, Trustee McRae, that you have some principals who truly get this and want the professional freedom and authority to do the things they need to do and what they want to do right away. And then they're going to work with each other to test their ideas out in professional conversations. And I suspect that these 10 leaders will become a professional learning group. And I'd like to think that now in our schools that they will become professional learning communities with the principals. We're doing something right now, if I may, Chair, that I think is serving us really well. Recently through through Brenda Badette and now through Terry Gardner, who worked for us in student success. We have linked schools into triads of 3 and from different areas, and they travel and spend a day or more in each other's schools sharing the ideas they're using. And what I understand now that is probably one of the most successful things where we're really talking about what works for kids, and it's not sort of waiting for, turn the light on September 5th, we'll try this. Is if it works, why aren't we doing it right now? And so I think we're going to pay much more attention to the kids who are struggling. And I think as we really start to understand data management, the issues that we can deal with true evidence-based decision making, that what we're going to be able to is talk about the kids who are behind or not even trying as you related to it. And my belief is that this is going to serve us better.
Yep, go ahead, Trustee McRae.
Okay, and the second question I have is, in terms of building capacity for our principals, how do I put this? Where do you start? Where do you start with something that huge when you have so many different principals? And I can just think within my own community, they are all at different levels in terms of their ability to be community leaders. If that's one of the characteristics we are hoping to aspire in our principals, what will that look like, David?
Oh, through you, Chair.
Go ahead.
We have, humbly, I say this, one of the best school improvement planning processes that's involved. In fact, in our audits that our senior staff are going through the schools, we are seeing absolutely powerful plans and strategies in the community. So we've got one leg up on that we have a group of people who plan effectively. And that's been done with 5 years of capacity building and having our principals involved in change and being agents of change, and not managers of change, but leaders of change. And we have, and I'll go specifically into your area, you perhaps have one of the strongest groups that is ready to do this of any group. And I go, and I'm not going to name names, you know who I'm talking about. They are totally ready for this, and what they're looking from the senior team now is identification of their leader in their area will be a person that they can identify with, that they see as a purposeful, energetic, person who would never ask for someone to do something they weren't prepared to do themselves, and are going to become a real partner with their trustee and with community leaders in raising the bar in their community. But this is not come out of the blue. We have a lot of people ready, but if I go further, Chair, I took every single name and every single person, I put them through a rubric like you've described. Who's ready, who's not, and I would mislead you if I didn't say, I have some questions about, when you have a large group, I've said a couple of people, I'm not quite sure they're going to be totally ready for this. That's going to take, for Ian and I, some hand-holding. It's going to take visits, it's going to take time, it's going to take capacity building. It's also going to take linking a very talented principal to be a mentor for someone who perhaps does not have the same inspirational desire to lead that the way they can, is that you can do it. But I believe we're going to do right now, one of the next moves will be to move people into positions where they think they're going to be successful. We're probably going to make and Ian and I have talked about this, probably make some significant moves of people to different schools now. And I think that's going to be very important for the organization as well. But it's not perfect, but we're going to take a really good shot.
Trustee McPherson.
When I look at this model, and I'll admit it's not the first time I've seen it, would one of the roles of these, not just sure how to describe the principal, be to enhance the success of a Families of Schools Council? In some areas they're very successful. For whatever reason, we've never been able to get one to work in the Perth Family of Schools. In conjunction with that, would it create a larger engagement of the school communities as a whole, as well as that of the local trustee? Is that part of the rationale behind this, or is that simply my observation through the chair?
Through you, Chair. Trustee McPherson, you're absolutely right on. And we talked a bit about this, the truck stop that you and I were at. And you made reference to, a time a few years ago, maybe many years ago, of a model we talked about there. What I'm looking for, and my vision will be, is that as Carol and I were meeting with people in her community, is that the lead person, this coordinating administrative principal, their role will be to work with the trustee in the community to build capacities at their school councils. I'm not going to paint a picture this will be easy, because some of our areas it has moved and been very successful. In other areas, the parents are a little resistant to, well, I think the school's doing okay, I don't need to be in there once a month to talk to you as you go through. And I think this is a sensitivity. However, my vision would be that through this, that we would have 10 functioning sort of school council groups that would come together, and then I would hope would inform the Board of Trustees and inform our Parent Involvement Committee as we go through. But to say that's going to start like that, I think you're right in how you asked your question, that's a vision that we'd have for this, more engagement of our communities, and I think that will be helpful. And I certainly, from the people who I spoke with about this in all jurisdictions, the chief in Cornwall said that he saw this for him as someone that he would know, that he could go to, not on the big, huge dynamic issues, but school and community-related issues where, tell me, this is what I'm thinking, is this what I'm seeing, David? And we had David McDonald had a good visit with him. That's what he saw. It was interesting. I think, Carol, if my memory serves me correctly, JP had a very similar observation, that he sort of looked forward to a person that he would have a different relationship, knowing it was sort of from their community as they go through. And he did not in any way, as you shared this, sort of take a shot at Brockville. It wasn't, he was sort of saying that this might be an exciting thing to do.
Trustee Cartner.
Over the last few years, the role of the principal has been changing. They've become more a coach, master teacher, teacher to his or her staff. In the description that I see on coordinating administrative principals are some of the points that are going to be part of a job description that's being created for these 10 principals. I don't see that aspect of their job coming through on these. Yes, they're going to be caring in many ways, but as far as being the coach or the educational leader in the school, training the staff on curriculum, I don't see that there.
It may not be there, and I apologize if it's not boldly out there. I see that as probably the most significant issue of the coordinating administrative principal, that the people who we will identify will be singularly known as you said, this is a really, really good teacher, great principal, an instructional leader in their community. And we do not want to identify people who got the buses running on time and got the timetable organized and then their life is done. We see this as a person, and we have them right now. We have, I would say in our conversation, Carol, when you talked about some of the people who work for us, I have between 25 and I would say people who very easily will be that type of leader, who will be caring, will be considerate, will be able to have crucial conversations, at the same time have a very, very high skill of saying, this is what I believe is what they're asking for us to do with our teachers in our classroom. I'm not asking them to be an expert, but I want them to be known as the true advocate for pedagogical excellence in our schools.
Trustee Buckland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we look at students on this educational highway, I like this boomerang visual. I've forgotten what number it is, the 6 R's, but when you look at the change in trajectory, there's already a large payload being carried into the outer space toward graduation. And how we change so that there's a greater emphasis on the student, particularly where other issues come into play, that is ability, failure, dropout, social economic poverty. As George Bernard Shaw said, the 7 deadly sins are poverty, 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 poverty. And overcoming that is at least a existential struggle. But I like some of the things that we're doing, where you develop confidence. One of the ways we can develop more confidence and motivation is through continuity, where we have stability in the teaching cadre and in the principal level as well. I just want to mention a testimonial of a student, well, he's a graduate now, I met, and the Leger School, then known as the Alternative School, and a fellow named Blake Berry followed this kid when he dropped out of school. So he went to work some job. Blake Berry was there and said, hey, you have to finish high school. He quit that job and went somewhere else. He still caught up with him, and so he was able to follow, and maybe this is a new, stronger role for the Leger School, to keep in touch with dropouts, so that we do convince and draw them back in and help them in this new model of achievement. I look forward with confidence to helping in any way I can.
So the whole night I've been looking at this large book in front of you, and I keep thinking, okay, this is the agenda item you're going to bring that out for, and I would have put odds that this would have been the agenda item, that we would have had something come from the complete work of William Shakespeare. I'm disappointed, Art. So maybe is it still to come?
It does deal with management, not at school board level, but at kingdom levels, where more serious errors cause problems.
Next meeting.
Okay.
I'm donating it to the technical library for senior admin cultural enhancement.
On flesh. Trustee McAllister.
I know over the past 3.5 years I've asked a lot of questions, and I've not necessarily been a cheerleader totally, but I have to tell you honestly that I support this new administrative plan. I think it's a better deployment of our human resources. It reinforces my major reason for being a trustee, which is the support and my belief in the local school in the local community and the people and the students there. I thank you for having listened to our input over the past 3.5 years. And I think our work, however, has just begun in terms of our ability to deliver on what we are promising at our elementary and in our secondary schools. So in terms of building leadership capacity and teaching excellence and learning outcomes, I wish you all the luck in the world. You have my cooperation.
Thank you, John.
Trustee Richards.
Under the coordinating principles, I like how you have them overseeing both public, or the elementary and the secondary together. I do like that, except I'm missing one school.
Okay, we haven't given it to anyone, and we did not close it.
Good.
But I have to let you know, when Ron and I were putting that together, we did do a double check. We came in here and checked. I said, you know, we got quite a few schools here. I said, I hope I inadvertently didn't
And
close
which one did you miss?
What's that?
Which one did you miss?
I'm gonna have to take a look in your family. Rito, Chimo, Lombardi. I thought I had them all.
No.
Before the end of the night, I'm gonna put it on that there, because we're not gonna let it escape as they go through, because we do have an escape plan. Which one was it?
Wilford.
Oh, no, Wolf, no, you see, that it may have been a change. I had Wolford.
Changed it.
I may have put it with Merrick, though. And this, by the way, this is draft, this, as you go through, and we'll talk about that one, because Wolford, and you know, you and Trustee Swan enjoy half the kids from that area, and they go different ways.
Merrillville's too.
And with those two schools, they're twin right now with the principal, and that was one of those ones where, quite frankly, that's why I'm calling this a draft. I expected that you guys will see this and say, why this one or why that one? And some of them are natural, but there were a couple that were, you know, historically have had different ways of going through. Thank you, Susan.
It's not Eric.
Okay, I'm just going to get to everybody that hasn't spoken, and then I'll come back. Trustee Swan.
I like a lot about this model, and I mentioned that, and I realize the goal is to increase student achievement, and I think that this is a step closer, going through the principals and the assistant principals to work towards achieving it, to increase our graduation rate, and ultimately, and hopefully bring up the ETOs where we've stalled or plateaued or gone down. The only thing, and I asked this in our meeting, the costs. What are the costs associated with this? Just from an accountability standpoint, as a trustee, I like the model, but I still think we need to know what are we agreeing to here.
I'm going to get back to, as I made in my presentation. I honestly believe that that's an absolutely fair question. And why I didn't approach it early in the process, I did not want to be accused by some of saying I've done this to save money. Because as I spoke to you, Lisa, when we met, there will be some changes at the senior table, and we're going to have 10 new people with added responsibility. And in that, I think we're probably, and I don't want to draw Ian in, so yes, but we took a look, and we have a large number of people who would be ambitious and want to do that, and as we go through. But I would say my guess would be, on the long term, this will save money. But if I said to you that was my notion, that wasn't. What I wanted to get at was a real hard look at a system that we've got to change. And I believe not only do we have to change, I think Ontario has to change. We have to look at doing this differently. And I didn't want to be accused that this was all done because David was trying to save money. At the end, there may very well be. I think when people add the numbers up, they'll say that. I'd like to, as we did in the boundary process, we did not enter that to save money, but people could save. In fact, the province has saved money from that. Did we realize that? No. In this one, I would hope that we'll realize some savings, and that will be applied to the process. So I believe in the next 45 days that I could give you a preliminary look, probably in the 45 days, but I'm not sure how accurate that will be either until we really get into September.
Go ahead, Trustee Swan.
Secretary, do that, and thank you. And I know you did save me in the past too. This is not just save money, but I just wanted to make sure that this isn't costing us twice as much as our current model is either, I guess, before agreeing to undertake the change now. for supporting the change now, but as I said, I do like the model, and I think this could help support our student achievement, and thank you.
Through you, Chair, Trustee Swan, to go a little deeper, one of the major savings is the fact that someone could argue that the coordinating administrative principals, they still have their schools, we talked about, they still have their school to operate and run and so forth, and we know that that will be a very big burden, and that the communication coordination part is another part of their assignment. Also, Trustee Carter, she shared with me that they already have a busy agenda. What are we going to do to support them? So, in getting back to your first question, to go a little more detail, I believe there will be some cost savings, but I also believe there will be some things that come in to support those 10 men and women, because I think that will show up as well. And so at the end of the day, I think we'll have a really hard look at this, probably about, I would say, for Superintendent Barkley, probably something more around November, where we can say, we think this is how it will pan out over the next 3 or 4 years, and give you something more accurate.
Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. Director, you pointed out that, change was kind of the major theme within this, and I think this board of trustees, and in fact some previous boards, are not afraid of change, and I applaud you for making this happen. I think there will be many organizations, and I say organizations because school boards would be very reluctant to make this type of change, and organizations in general would be reluctant to make this type of change. I mean, you're proposing, you're moving forward with a flattening environment. You're empowering your local principals to have that autonomy, that empowerment, I guess is the best word to go back to, is to make sure that they're connected with their communities, connected with the people who make this school board sustainable, and supporting us through sending their kids to our schools. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge that it takes some courage to make sure that we move forward with that change, and I applaud you for that. I think it also takes some courage to acknowledge that we have leaders in our system that are not all at the same level, and that's quite all right. It would be very disheartening to say that we have everyone at the same level, and I think not having evidence to provide to support that, but acknowledging that we have individuals that are at different levels, but a plan to get them to the next level is the important piece, and I believe you've encompassed that within your framework, and encompassed that within your next phase that would move forward. So I think it's overall courageous for us to be able to move forward in this direction, and I'm looking forward to having that piece in place to have that connection within our community. So again, just to go back, I applaud you for bringing this forward and making this something that will become a reality fairly soon.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. And you've given me an opportunity to go a little deeper into Trustee McRae's concern, which I think you were on a similar page. We do have them all over the map, but we have a significant mass that are ready to move. And you've seen them making presentations here with their audits. These are good people who are going to be, I believe, are going to serve the system. I believe, as in our conversation I had with Trustee McRae, said, flip it over and make the triangle work the other way. And I think this is the serve agenda is critical. That's a very important part of this. The other piece is that let's let these people get out there and inspire. And then going back to that this board is a champion of, is that the innovative agenda is not, you don't wait for the corner office to be the place of innovation, and I'm not taking a shot at the wizard here as you go through, but the fact is we have some really great things happening in our school, and those have to get around the system as fast as we can. And so I see this model as sort of us sort of serving the system, saying go, go, go as we go through. So the other piece was that the 9 days of professional development that we're organizing, team building and so forth, will be hopefully for the 10, because I take your metaphor a little further, David. I agree that even the 10 that we pick will be at different continuums of their abilities as leaders and so forth. And what I believe that Ian and I are going to try and do is to close the gap and bring the 10 together so that they're only as weak as the weakest member of that group of 10. I think that's going to help us to some degree with, I believe, the concern that also Trustee McRae shared.
I would like to think that too, that in a model where the decision making is much closer to the school, that we would benefit from the potential leadership from within. You know, the Maxwell's idea, the leader within. You know, you don't have to be at the top.
That's right.
That if you're an EA or you're a custodian or an office administrator or an EC or whatever, and you're a teacher and you're in a school and you realize that there's not 3 levels to get, that you actually have, you can go down the hallway and talk to somebody who can actually bring about affect change more quickly, that we would benefit from the whole become much more creative and engaged in the leadership. So
Chair,
I think we should
respond
get
to
that.
your query. I think that's an interesting piece. I think our system has picked up some of the energy you've described and some of the freedom to be innovative. I take a look at 2 of our schools and organization that weren't waiting for the new year to start something, but we have 2, they call them flipped classrooms. I'm not sure if it's fair to call it a flip, but they're doing a different style of instruction with 2 teachers that are doing literally, they're doing instruction, take home to the kids, the moms and dads go into the computer or Facebook and pull off. The teacher said, this is the lesson we're working on, this is what I'm taking up tomorrow. Moms and dads talk with the kids. Now, if they were sort of waiting for our curriculum unit to come out and say, here's the new best answer, and we're going to introduce this next year, I'd like to think that that energy is going to come, that something good is going to come down that's be used quickly and turned up in many of our classrooms as we go through.
Okay, so everybody that wants to has had a chance to speak. So start back over here with Trustee McCrae.
Through you, Chair. So just to add to what the director is saying is you have your principal who's the shining star, I guess you could say, in terms of your family of schools. Then you have your principals who are community leaders, and automatically that then empowers teachers, and when you empower teachers, you empower students. And that's actually how this whole I see this whole model working. I do want to talk about, though, if we could go back to the slide where we had the way that we have it all split out with our area right here. Okay, I want to ask 2 questions. The first one I want to ask is special education. Where does that fall under these blank? I can't see up there.
It will be in our program department, and it's going to be a very important part of the program activity. As you know, at SEAC right now, and I say this, and this is certainly a great compliment to our superintendents who have the program piece, is that our board is an exceptionally strong board at special education, and we cannot take it for granted. But it has to rest in really outstanding teaching, pedagogical, strong teaching as you go through. So that piece will be critical. The person who has that portfolio is going to have some strong people with them, and you'll know many of those people. But we are saying that there's going to be a real opportunity to take a different look at the people who are serving us. Those are system principals, and we're really going to attach, again, the changes to what the principal's doing in the school, the special education at their place. I think that's right.
I'm having trouble reading this, so
am I.
I'm asked, Rhonda's going to run off some copies of it, okay?
Sure.
And the other question.
Rick Gales did not help me with my presentation, just for the record.
No, we know that because it's color.
The last question I have is that communication is so imperative to everything that we do, and sometimes I've had some queries, to be very honest, when decisions are made at this board. Let's just use a policy for an example, and how that actually trickles down into a procedure and is practiced within the classroom or within the administration of the school. So explain to me, when we go through this system, how we are going to ensure that when this board makes a policy, that it is filtered down through that system and actually is implemented into the classroom?
The dynamics about this system is that, quite frankly, those 10 lead principals report directly to Ian and I. And so when a procedure or a policy change, and let's say it's a policy governance change, let's use tonight's example. We have not created a new policy on alcohol in schools, but this board has directed me to say, no one looks the other way. No one say, oh, no. We're saying 0-0, and that's going on. In this particular model, what would be happening there is that we would probably, and again, this is Ian and I working this out. We're trying to figure out how we're going to work this together, how we're going to supervise. But I could well imagine that, one, with the technology we have now, all 10 could be called. I'd like to have all 10 talk to us at 9:30 tomorrow. Ian and I are having a meeting to discuss a policy that's on the books, but the trustees have asked us to pay close attention to it. Okay, here's the issues. And then we'd have online a really interesting conversation about that. Another issue, potentially, let's go back to an issue that turned out okay, but was highly difficult for us. A student falls asleep in the bus driver leaves the kid in the bus, and we have a policy on that too, and a procedure, and so is the bus company. We've got phone calls and different things to happen. And let's say the DUID group say, David, tighten that up. What's going on out there? Again, this would be one of those ones where potentially what I would say I'd like to have all 10 of you in tomorrow at 3:30. I want to talk about this. How are you going to communicate that with your family and schools? How are you going to connect with your principals? How are you going to connect with school council chairs? How can you ensure confidence in your community that that potentially won't happen tomorrow in another one of our schools? And I see this as probably dynamic in the sense that we've lost a layer, but there still is one, because those 10 people who we'll be training and working with, they've got to become very effective communicators. Well, I think we're becoming better at that. But remember, in each of our reviews we've had over the years, communication continues to be perhaps the most important issue that we have to pay attention to. So I see this as helping us, but I think what's going to help us with this one is that for Ian and I'll be very straightforward, although there are many distractions for us, and we've had distractions, this will be singularly, our job is to lead. And we're going to pay close attention to this. And with, as you eloquently said, we met at the truck stop, is that how do we get this to the classroom as fast as possible? I believe this will work, but we haven't removed all the layers. We've removed one important layer.
We don't always meet at the truck stop.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's kind of an oxymoron, eloquent and truck stop. It's just
No, don't analyze it. It was a truck stop, and that's where we've met every time. Truck stop. So.
Not all the time.
Oh, no, that's right. Sorry.
Trustee Karkner.
Through your chair to the director, in your communication, you've used the words pick and choose the 10 people. You have a process in mind as to how they will be picked or chosen?
Yes. In fact, Ian, can you help me with this one? Because what we've talked about, and Ian has said this eloquently, we have 25, I would say 25 who can do this for us. We know what they can do. It's not like we have to race them through, get 10 references and have your resume and all that. We know what these people do. You see them make their presentations. And what Ian and I have talked about is a much more simple process, is asking for a letter of intention of what you think why you're interested. And then we're talking about the two of us sitting down and really just talking to these people about where they see their career going, their interests and so forth, and really let them talk. Because what we're looking at in this is that this is not a permanent assignment, as I shared with you. This would be 2- and 3-year assignments. Because we'd like to encourage capacity building and leadership. And the other piece is why I want to begin 2 and 3 years. I don't want to change all 10 at once. So there's going to be a group that's going to come in. It'll be 2 years, and a group 3 years. So we will have a turnover, and that group will come in and help as we go through. Ian, do you want to comment on your vision that you see how we'll identify these leaders?
Well, I guess we already have a pretty good knowledge, I think, of our cadre of leaders. We spend a lot of time in our schools. We spend a lot of time working with our principals face-to-face through our leadership programs. You know, I think it's almost an artificial exercise to come in and tell me the story what you do. I think we have lots of evidence of what these people do, from the initiatives in their school, watching them work firsthand with their staff. So I think we want to count on that information that we have at hand rather than, you know, an arbitrary process that's maybe a bit of a hoop jump. I think we know the quality in our system. I think it needs to be fair. People need a chance to, you know, maybe there's something we haven't seen that they can show us or bring that forward, but I think we're fairly confident in knowing the leadership skills of our pool of principals right now.
The follow-up?
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
the initial comes from the person, the initial step.
But Carol, I'll be quite frank with you. There'll be some people I'll say, I hope you're interested in this because your skills, and that we will chat. And that will be about the 25 that I've gone through the rubric, say, these are people that can really make a difference. But as Ian has said, we may have some really talented people say, that's not for me as we go through, but we have a good. The other piece I'll share with the trustees, and I appreciate Charlotte doing this for me. I've asked Charlotte to work with me over the next 2 years. Charlotte is great with the details. When the wizard hasn't got all the things, she does a great job of that. Charlotte's going to continue to work with me personally and the team to help them out in situations as they're going through. And Charlotte, as you know, has been working on the job descriptions of these people, and that'll be an important part of what we're going to do. And when we establish, although Ian has said it's going to be very fair, we will be able to brief people on why we did what we did. The second piece, that Susan Richards took this from our conversation through your chair, is that it'll be a combination secondary elementary as we go through, and that'll be very important for the balance of the organization.
Trustee Richards, do you have a question? Trustee McPherson? Somebody's hand was up.
Just a comment. I think we as a Board of Trustees have to recognize this as a fairly substantial reorganization of how administration's delivered in this board. Some pretty sweeping changes here. I feel it should enhance the local autonomy some, and while it's not as public as our Boundary 2020 process, it could be no less influential, and that's simply a comment.
Trustee McMillan.
Through you, Chair. When I look at the model, there are a lot of key people in here, and you used a term in your presentation that I think is critical. You talk about a paradigm shift, but you're talking about open-minded. And it's going to take a lot of mind shifts, and I believe a lot of people that can move into these leadership positions have open minds to begin with. There are two critical people I see in this equation, and I'm going to put you on the spot, and that's you and that's Ian. How do you see your leadership role change in terms of a model that is much different than we've operated under over years?
You're supposed to ask that in private session. No, that was humor. Well, let's just say this one.
So you're not even going to wait for me to say that you
So
can have
through
the
you,
floor?
Chair, sorry. I considered myself told up. Through you, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, as around the table, many of you have been around for quite a while. Ian and I, we row a boat differently. I don't know how to sail a boat. Ian sails a boat. Ian is very talented in things that I have no desire to do. Although I did become a skier late in life, and I'm watching him take up the guitar, and I'm really proud of him because we're doing new things. But I think one of the strengths about that top box is we see the world in many ways very, very different. And I think for the two of us will be to embrace that diversity and make it a strength. So that when I say, God, you know, what is going on over there at Wolford? I just wanted to remember, I remembered Wolford. And Ian will say, David, here's what I think's going on, and this is what I know the person, this is what I think the strengths are. And I think that, as you know, Ian's no pushover, and I'm no pushover, is that I think there's going to be some dynamics in there where we lead the people. And I think the beginning of that first team to come together is going to be critical for the organization. And I agree with where you're taking this. And I think with the 10 CAPs, the coordinating administrative principals, I think they're going to see E&I as very two different ways that we see the world But in the vis of, at the end, when a conclusion, the decision's been made. And the other thing is that Ian and I have enjoyed over the years, we talk all the time, whether it's, and we talk about the problems, and I think we really try not to be judgmental of an opinion, but to challenge a thought.
Can I just get, and I see where you're taking it, but it's not necessarily where I was taking the question. Maybe I wasn't as articulate as I should have been.
I hope the answer still was fairly
good. The answer is good. No, I know myself as a classroom teacher, when I get into project-based learning and in experiential education and so on, I had to give up some of the control of things that a traditional teacher always wanted to maintain control of, and by giving control to the students in terms of the learning. That was a tough challenge, but over time I grasped that and I saw the benefits of giving that control over. And the question really is, how do you see your mind shift changing in terms of being able to make this model work, in the sense that you're, in essence, controlling but giving up control of something you traditionally had control of? That's basically where I'm looking at in terms of...
I'll answer, and through you, Chair, I'm going to encourage Ian to answer too, because I bet he's got a real good opinion. Through you, is that...
Yep. Ian, would you want to answer first?
Ian, go first, and then that's great, thank you. Appreciate that.
I was going to give you the final word.
Well, that's good, I like that.
I think in a nutshell,
you,
in a way you've answered your own question, I think. It's handing over, it's building the capacity of others to do the work rather than directing and controlling people to do the work. So it's about being a teacher, it's about being a guide, it's about being a coach. That's really how I see our work. And co-constructing the vision with those people rather than for them.
Through you, Chair, at the risk of talking too much. We have a unique relationship here where it sometimes kicks me and stuff like that too. But I think, Vice Chair McMillan, you make a very important point here, is that, and I was going to use a similar word that Ian chose, I don't think that we're going to be authoritative or some sort of arbitrate people. The 9 days are going to be spent building this team. We know that in the Education Act that, yes, we have to make some tough decisions. That, it comes down to accountability, and you'll expect me to do that. But I've never worked, and I think this group knows this, I don't do thou shalts. Or, in fact, my principles are usually, a memo from the director. This must be really important as you go through. If it hasn't got champions for kids on it, they really don't pay attention to the stuff I send. I think what's going to happen here, the excellence is going to come out of the relationships. I watched you teach, and you know perfectly well, the great teacher makes room for the other people and sees their strengths and then has the ability to back off when they should grow. And I think one thing that I say this to Ian and I both, we can't be afraid of a bit of failure here either, because I've never seen anyone who hasn't done some great learning when they bang their head and go, what was that about? And I think we have to be there, not to necessarily create a net, but I think we have to honor that resilience is a very important part of the leadership's ability. And if we're busy telling them what to do, what risks are going to take, how innovative will they be? And I think that's one of the strengths of flattening out the organization, saying, I think we're going to spend more time and go for it.
Just one final comment, and I really like what both of you have said, because I believe that for this model to work, we've already taken one positive step in terms of how you have identified your role. And I think if I can summarize what you're both saying, you're both going into this as learners. You're leaders and learners at the same time. And I think that right there in itself is a positive step in the right direction, and will model for the 10 people that we have leading who will have the same mindset. So I think I asked those deliberately because I wanted to explore everyone's mindset here, and mindsets are at the center of this whole thing. So thank you.
Okay. Other comments? Okay. Now, I know this is a big move, and there's a lot of changes. However, this, just in case you wonder, we're not required to vote on this. This is, we hire David and give him direction. This is his job, so there's not going to be a motion or anything. I just wanted to make sure that you understood that I wasn't missing something, but that never was the intent. David doesn't need our permission to do this. He certainly enjoys our support, I think, and that's what he presented it for, and I think we voiced that. David, I appreciate you taking the time to present it, and I know you've worked very hard on it. I know it's been we've exercised your leadership skills, and I think that these are, when the team hired you, I imagine that some 10 years ago, before I became on the board, 11, 12 years ago, I think this was the type of thing that they envisioned you having the will and capacity to do. So thanks very much for doing that and presenting. And we're looking to see how the balance unfolds.
And may I respond? I'd just like to cordially thank the trustees for the time they've given me. We met at a variety of places, and I do appreciate the fact that you did acknowledge that I paid attention to what you're saying, and thank you very much. And I'm inspired by this. I think it's going to be something that we're going to work very, very hard at, and having the support of your trustees is critical when you embark on something. I thank you very much for your confidence, and I think our senior team is going to do some really spectacular things for kids in Eastern Ontario.
Yeah. Thank you. And certainly, it's nothing that's in here is a surprise to any of us. This is all very consistent. And certainly, I see a lot of the ideas that I heard trustees talking about in it. So good. All right, we'll move on now. Hopefully, we don't have to hear from David for a while. No, we don't. So the next thing we have to do is move back into a regular board meeting. So I need a motion for that. Trustee Gartner, Trustee Buckland. Just give me a show of hands. That's good. Thank you. Gosh, that was fast. So, report from private session. The private session from the Committee of the Whole meeting on April 9th. Two property matters were discussed. And the following recommendations are being brought to the board. Moved by, I need a mover, Trustee McPherson, seconded by Trustee McDonald, that the Upper Canada District School Board decline interest in the St. Marguerite Bourgeois Elementary Catholic School, French Catholic School. You go ahead and pose a question on that. There we go. Trustee McDonald.
Just put him in. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Okay, and the second motion moved by Trustee Richards and Trustee McMillan, that the Upper Canada District School Board decline interest in St. Joseph Elementary French Catholic School. Go ahead and cast your vote. We still have Trustee Garrow online, and I also understand Superintendent Coombs, you're online as well?
Yes, I am.
Great, thanks.
Boot me out.
Yes, I am.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, report from, that passes unanimously. Report from Committee of the Whole public session. We had two school presentations and a couple of discussion items, and there are no recommendations being brought forward. Move now to school year calendar. Mr. Coombs, you're online, and we have Superintendent Allen here.
Yep.
You're going to take the lead on this, Super Val? Okay, go ahead.
Great.
So the purpose of the presentation is to seek your approval for the 2014-15 school year calendar as required by the Ministry of Education. A regular calendar needs to provide 194 instructional days between September 1st and June 30th, and this needs to be submitted to the Ministry by May 1st. For our draft school year calendar, it was distributed to staff, school council chairs, and school staff via principals and vice principals to our union and to our unions. Discussion took place also with the Catholic District School Board of Eastern Ontario. The draft calendar was also posted on the Upper Canada District School Board website and their Facebook, our Facebook page, inviting public input. The features of the calendar, which is a little different than the first one that was distributed, and I'll get back to that in a moment, is that the school year will run from September 2nd, 2014 to June 26, 2015, with the last day of classes for students being June 24th. The secondary students begin their semester 2 on February 2nd. And then there's a list of proposed PA days would be September 26th, October 24th, January 30th, May 29th, June 25th, and June 26th. The first dates all coincide with the Catholic District School Board of Eastern Ontario, but because they are starting, their first PA day will start prior to September 1st. It will be, their first PA day is August 28th. So there's just one day that doesn't coincide, but because both of those are outside of instructional time, there's no additional cost for busing during that time. So all of the number of professional activities and evaluation of exam days and holidays all conform with the ministry regulations for the prescribed purposes. And I just want to say I want to commend Superintendent Coombs. He did all the legwork on this, and he is online to answer any questions that we have, that you might have about this. You'll also notice in the attachments to the board minutes that there is also the proposed calendars for the 15-16 school year and 16-17 school year, but with holidays and but no PA days in them. Yeah. So, we're open to questions.
Okay. Trustees, any comments or questions? Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. This is something that I've harped on for a number of years, asking for a multi-year school year calendar. I'm glad to see that we have it. However, I'm not, I don't understand why we don't have PA days allotted in there. I mean, it is a draft. And they seem to be falling in the same area year after year. If we're not going to put the PA days, then it's just the calendar.
I'll let Superintendent Coombs answer that question.
Mr. Coombs, Superintendent Coombs, can you help us with that? Did you hear the question?
Yes, I certainly did. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. The problem is the Ministry of Education will puts out a calendar every year, 1 year in advance with PA days. They will put March breaks and holidays out 2 years past next year. So I can't tell you with definitive certainty of when March break will be next year, as well as when Christmas break will fall. The problem is that we will be going through. We still don't know if we're going to have 6 PA days in the following years, or if they will be ministry mandated or not. So we could put it out as a proposed calendar, and certainly if that's the direction from trustees, we certainly can do that. But certainly there would be, we would have to make it very clear that there's no certainty that those PA days will fall in those times, or even that there will be the same number of PA days.
Trustee McDonald?
I mean, certainly that's something that I've been expressing, as I said, for a number of years, and if my colleagues feel differently, then I will certainly allow them to do that. But I think there's a benefit in that. It leads into what we talk about from a service excellence standpoint. I mean, we have parents that are trying to plan trips a year out, 2 years out, They want to know when March break is. They want to know when certain other holidays might be. They might want to tie it into a PA day around a long weekend. Whatever the case might be. And I think if we have a general idea of the number of days that we have, and again, it is a projection, it's a forecast, it's an estimate, it's a draft, it's whatever proposed, whatever language we want to use, it can be framed that way on the calendar itself with a watermark. But as we get closer to that year, it becomes more refined, it becomes more structured into the reality of what those dates might be. And I think it's just, it gives an opportunity for our parents to say, you know, we're thinking about what you're doing and what you need to do on a regular basis to be a parent to have a life outside of school. So I think it would be beneficial for our parents to be able to see those types of things. And, you know, clearly we have draft on the top, but I think, you know, my recommendation would be that whether it be proposed or proposal, draft, something in a watermark, it is very clear then at that point that it bites you in the eyes when you're looking at it, that certainly it's not set in stone, but it is something that we're working towards. I would appreciate that, and if my colleagues feel otherwise, then I'll defer to them.
Okay. Trustee McRae?
Through you, Chair. I'm in total agreements with the draft for 2014-2015, and I'm in total agreements with what our board, our staff have done to this point, and that's not to include the PA days. If we're talking about service excellence, and we need to give them the exact dates, because I think it's just very misleading to people to give them watermarks or whatever you'd like to call it. If I'm planning a holiday in 2015, 2016, I need to know the exact dates. I don't need a watermark. I need the exact dates. So I think what David has, Superintendent Coons has put together here, I think is great, and I think that's what we should stick with.
Trustee Buckland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, a question about why we're not starting August 28th when we have a busing authority that would give us coordination, when the Catholic Board of Eastern Ontario is starting on 28th of August.
Mr. Coombs, Superintendent Coombs?
Yes. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. We cannot, because of our contractual obligations with OSSTF, we cannot start school any day before September 1st. But that does give us an opportunity to consider that in 15-16 when there's a very late Labor Day.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, I need a motion.
Question?
Go ahead, Trustee Garrow.
Yeah, just that, is it possible for, just through you, Chair, to Superintendent Coombs, is it possible for me to share this with Akwesasne School Board, the calendar?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely, Mr. York.
Okay, thank you very much.
Trustee Karkner?
I'd like to make a motion
Okay, you're moving it.
to accept the calendars as presented.
And seconded by Trustee McMillan. Let the Upper Canada District School Board approve the 2014-15 regular school year calendar for submission to the ministry by May 1st, 2014. I think we can drop the May 1st part of that motion. Let's just go all the way up to the ministry. All right, any other comments or questions? All right. Please. I guess I gotta go there. Okay, Trustee McDonald?
I just voted.
In favor?
No.
Okay, that passes with one opposed, with David McDonald opposed. Okay. All right. Move now to the accountability framework update and have our work group chair give us an update.
I can do that. Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm going to make this brief. I have the co-chair on the phone line. I have all my committee members here. We've been having incredibly rich conversations in the Accountability Framework Committee meetings. I think, you know, it's got, for this to work, it's a trustee-driven committee, a trustee-driven agenda. However, for it to work, there has to be trust completely through the system. There's to be trust from the trustees and trust from management. And what we are seeing is that trust is building and building in terms of the conversations that we're having. Just on a side note, you know, at the last meeting, Patty, your contribution was excellent. Thank you so much for what you brought to us. Sarah Crawford was there and gave us some information on some projects she's working on. Jeremy, invaluable what you're adding, Phil. We're getting good, rich conversations, good input, and what we're looking for is being able to clearly define what a key result indicator is and what we have presently happening in the board and what we may have to either modify for our purposes as key result indicators, or perhaps we need to go outside and get someone else to come in and give us a look at what we're asking for through a lens that's going to address the needs of the trustees. So what I'm really pleased with is the progress that we're making in terms of clearly defining what a key result indicator is as opposed to what a performance indicator is, and that's what management uses. The other thing that we're spending a lot of time on, it really is reaping the benefits of some of the discussions we had in the Patty Barth presentation, and I suggest any of the trustees that were not there, I know the PowerPoint presentation was sent to you, go back and take a look at it because it talks about data. There's one thing that she has in there is a chart, and we're asking David to take a good look at that chart, and that's the return on investment, and we're looking at costs and impact and maybe decision making around that kind of model. So if you get a chance, go back and take a look at that. The people that are on the committee know full well what I'm talking about. So the other thing that we were spending a lot of time on the last meeting was really discussing, David was taking us through a cycle, and we were looking at various cycles in terms of you know, looking at a benchmark and how we work through this model. Again, if you take a look at Patty Barth's model, you'll see that, and it's very similar to other models that are address the same issue. There's a lot of rich discussion. Just as I was sitting here now, an email came in from Greg that we have another possible source of someone that can do a school culture scan for us. So we're really taking a good look at what's out there. And as we move forward with this, the bottom line really is for David to be able to bring to us key result indicators that is going to help us measure the effectiveness of the strategic plan. And so if there's any questions or comments, we'd be glad to take them. But
Trustee McRae?
Through you, Chair, or through you, Chair?
Through me.
I just wanted to say that I have found the presentations that have been made so far are, like, they just keep getting better from my perspective. And I mean, a lot of information sharing, great ideas, and I was just very, very impressed with the presentations that we have had. I'm hoping we're going to continue with that, and I'm waiting patiently to hear from my family schools. But no, I just thought that, you know, this whole accountability framework has taken it right back into the classroom where it should be, and where we're going to see those indicators and where we need to see those results. So I think it was one of the most brilliant things our board has done in terms of accountability. So.
Through you, Chair, just I would love to sit here and take full credit for it, but I can't. These two guys right here initiated it, and as much as I would like to pretend I'm the chair, I'll be honest with you. So the day that the pineapple is sat right here.
For the second time?
For the second time, and those of you who don't know that story, you can ask me later. Basically, that second pineapple means you've overstayed your welcome. But, so the moment that pineapple appears there, Greg is the driving force behind this. And I'm very proud of the fact that both these guys initiated this, but the committee is incredibly powerful too in terms of the richness of the conversation, but you cannot overlook David and the people that he brings to the table to discuss with us, because I think it's that element of trust that is going to benefit the system and benefit the kids at the end of the day. And that's what the accountability framework is all about. It's the strategic plan, holding everyone accountable to that, and through a lens that is specialized in terms of what a trustee needs to know and how a trustee will report that to the community. So thank you for saying that, and I would love to have stand up and go, yeah, but it's, I give credit where it's due.
And if I may just add one other question. You mentioned an outside source coming in with a new lens or a different sense, and is that something we're looking?
Yeah, so there were, when the report was adopted by the board, there were a number of result indicators that we were going to use, and we have the report that we get in the fall on how the board is being perceived, and then we had a student culture scan and a staff culture scan, and those were both scheduled to be conducted by an outside group, because we don't have the capacity to do it on our own. And so we're working on that right now. We're also looking into the graduate study as well, which is a much bigger project. And we have had 2 groups make proposals on those 3 items, and we'll be reviewing that and getting that going. We're also coming very close to having the graduation rate component coming to the board. I would expect that next month. So we're going to see more and more parts. Any trustee that wants to attend the work group is more than welcome. It's you know, there's an expected number that needs to turn out, but anybody can join it. And it's really, its work is getting all that information coordinated so that it can come to the board for us to discuss. That's its big job. We're also working on what the budget looks like and what does an evidence or data-based budget look like, so that when that comes, it feeds the framework. So. Anyway, thanks for all the positive comments, Trustee McMillan, and I'm looking for that pineapple. Okay.
Least expected.
Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on then to the report of the Special Education Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Chair. You have the report in front of you, so I'm not going to read it, but I just want to point out 2 areas that are of particular interest, and that is the issue of gifted programming and the new approach, which was explained to us by Vice Principal Nancy Holman and Superintendent Victoria Hemming. And it's rather exciting for the students, because it's not, used to be enrichment was a question of, or dealing with gifted students was a question of enrichment and more. That is not the case whatsoever there now. And the students are active in pursuing their passions and learning goals through modules that are being developed, not only by the teachers, but by themselves. And students from one area can communicate with students in another area, and we're using technology very effectively in that regard. So that was one thing. The second thing was Vice Principal Holman talked to us about Empower, which is a tool to promote reading for those students who are having extreme difficulty. because it's very obvious that students who can't read just cannot proceed very well, very far in life. And the issue of reading is one that we take for granted, but the ability to read, or the ability to learn to read, is one that we take for granted. That is not the case for a lot of these students. And for a lot of these students, they have to decode the language. They have to decode words. So whenever we were given this issue, this explanation of Empower, I found out that one of the schools in my area, Linkletter, has it and is practicing it now. So I made an appointment with the principal, and I observed for an hour. And Mrs. Pomeroy, who worked very intensely with about 8 students, and I learned all kinds of things like expressions, the strategies that they use, such as peeling off, sounding out, rhyming, pushy E's, vowel alerts, consonant blends, stretchings, spelling patterns. It was amazing to watch how this was working out. And from what I gather, that the success that we've experienced with this program is just incredible in helping these kids. So that's about it. The rest of the report you can read.
Trustee Karkner?
Can I just make a comment about what I heard today about one of our autistic children?
Sure.
When I was on the way to the breakfast this morning on the news, on the radio, a young boy from North Dundas District High School, a grade 7 student, I believe, was interviewed on the radio station, and he had created a jingle along with his music teacher to advertise station Y 101.1, which is a country music station, which is what he loves to listen to. Me too, since I had it on. But anyway, I was quite impressed with this child, and he was very outspoken about the fact that he was autistic. And in talking to the principal a little later on in the morning, she said he's done a marvelous job of turning his life around with the support of the people and the programs that are in North Dundas. So I was quite impressed, and adds to your SEAC report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee McCrae?
Through you, Chair. I just wondered if this evening we had this annual update, 2013 accessibility report. Is that something that either our staff or our SEAC representatives are going to present to the SEAC committee? Because I thought that was very impressive this evening, how we've moved through the various steps and measures that we have to meet in order to meet those deadlines and those criteria. And I just thought I'd just mention that.
Well, we can certainly make it available to them, but I think that it's not so student focused. I'm not sure.
I just think that those organizations, I think it's good education for those organizations to know that our board is on board with all of the measures that are necessary to make education accessible.
It's probably
point of order. It's not about education accessibility. It's about communication accessibility,
okay,
building accessibility. Well, I have to point that out.
okay. All right. Hang on. Trustee has asked for it to be considered. The committee can consider it. We're not making a motion, and we're not telling them they have to. I think the committee can assess whether they want to or not, so we'll leave it at that. Okay, any other comments or questions? Trustee McPherson.
Just in reference to Trustee McRae's request, I believe SEAC has their agendas set out, and I'm not sure if the accessibility plan is on that list or not. We can simply bring it up at the next meeting and see if there's an interest for them to view it. It's already come to the board first, so it's simply going to pass on to them as an information item. That's what it'll be.
Okay. I think that the key is that trustees can make suggestions, and that's fine, and by no way is, whether it's, when one trustee makes a request, it's not a motion, it's not a directive. So SEAC is well led, and it can, I'll let it make the decision. We'll let it make the decision. So. All right, Trustee McDonald, update on our OPSBA.
Just briefly, I'll give you a couple points and I'll allow my colleagues that were present at the last regional meeting to share their comments as well. Regional meeting was held in Ottawa on April 12th. Major discussions for that session primarily were around the priorities. I gave my annual speech about having too many priorities and making sure that the administration can function within their mandate on a regular basis. As a regional team, we did not add to the priorities. We believe that what was submitted was fine. We had some contextual conversation around whether it was the whole child or the well-being of children. Also, we discussed the plan, or I guess it would be the plan, I guess, as to how OPS will be moving forward on addressing Bill 122. More of that information will be shared at the Board of Directors meeting, which is coming up next weekend, actually, May 2nd and 3rd. So that OPSPA does have a plan associated to it. We discussed the fees associated to OPSPA and how it would be paid. There's an overall feeling from, I believe, executive and administration within OPSPA that the government will pay for, if not all, a majority of the costs associated to being the bargaining agent, for lack of a better term, for the English Public School Boards. So there really wasn't any concrete decision, I guess, around that, or information as to how it was going to happen. It was all going to evolve at the next Board of Directors meeting. Those are the 2 points that I wanted to cover, and we were well represented at the regional meeting. Trustee Buckland, Trustee McAllister, and Trustee Carkman were there as well. Compared to Ottawa, I think they had 2 representatives in their hometown, so it was good to have a full slate of trustees out for that. And just a reminder that when we do have regional meetings, they are open to all trustees. So the next regional meeting is at the AGM in Niagara Falls. But then we'll have another regional meeting, usually September, October range. We tend to have another one. So those are the 2 points. Anyways, I'll let my colleagues offer anything else.
Anything else? Trustee Buckland?
Thank you. It's the usual comprehensive delivery by our director. But, just to follow up on the payment for our groups, the 4 trustee groups that will be doing bargaining. Minister Sandel said in Russell, when we met her there, that she would be providing money. She made the affirmation once more. And I informed her we were number 1, and that she acknowledged that as well. One of the other things that comes out is that these other boards are burdened with committees. I mean, they are doing a lot of small work, it seems, and they're tied up with these things. So they have the opportunity to think in a large way that we're doing with our KPIs and our accountability. So it's a pat on the back for all of you.
All right, thanks.
I'll just add quickly, though, we did mention from the actions being taken at individual boards, we mentioned the accountability framework, and only went into 2 particular areas, but certainly it piqued some interest within the other trustees.
Okay, student trustee report.
Chair. So on April 11th, the last Senate meeting of the year was held at Kentville Community Center. Trustees and senior staff in attendance were Jeff McMillan, John McAllister, Lisa Raymond, Peter Garrow, Greg Petersma, David Thomas, Carol Karkner, as well as former student trustee Sydney Collard, who came as a guest. Our guest speakers were Greg Petersman, David Thomas, and Peter Garrell. Chair Petersman spoke about
Smoking all right.
Nice.
He was smoking all
spoke about the drinking at prom and kind of stole my thunder, so I'm going to skip a bit here. But it was an interesting comment that came forth from one of the senators was that if we completely prevent alcohol from finding their ways into dances, there's a possibility of other ways of students sneaking illegal activities into dances. So just I thought it should be pointed out, maybe we should make sure we follow along with these things as it progresses so that we don't end up with problems, especially as drugs in the forms of pills are being more common. We're going to have to follow along and make sure we're preventing those as well. But after a good discussion, it seemed most of the senators understood and reasoned, and the reasoning and agreed with myself and Chair Petersman when we spoke about this. And then we had David Thomas speak to us about leadership and what it means to be a leader, and the importance of the roles on Senate. It was a great presentation, and they really enjoyed the activities. Peter Garrell presented about the history of First Nations partnerships with the school boards of North America and how these partnerships have both succeeded in some cases while failed in others. This information was distributed to all the senators and emphasized the importance of First Nations voice in school affairs. And after these presentations, our acclaimed incoming student trustee, Shayla Cruz, was introduced to the student senators, and she presented a campaign speech. She spoke about how she'd like to strengthen student voice in the board and keep lines of communication open between the board and Senate. She spoke of her experiences in leadership and how she wants to bring that into the trustee position. She also said that she'll probably be attending a meeting in 2 weeks, so everybody here could probably get to meet her. We then had our Family of Schools presentations where the House leaders spoke about events that are happening in the different schools. There's many great spirit events happening within the schools, and many planned as the year comes closer to an end. And that was pretty much it for Senate. I'm going to try to keep in contact with the senators for the rest of the year. So BCCs and AGM. So back in February, I attended the board council conferences for the Ontario Student Trustees Association. I attended many professional development sessions and made many connections with student trustees across Ontario. Currently, OSTA is actually supporting several school boards across BC and Alberta that are starting their own student trustees associations. So they're actually sending students out there to work with them to make this finalized in the legislature. And in May, I will be attending, along with Shayla, our incoming student trustee, the AGM, or the annual general meeting. And I ask that the board continue to support OSTA as it is a crucial organization in preparing the student trustees. And now that Senate is finished, I'll be keeping contact with the senators, but also working on preparing Shayla for her role on the board, and so that her transition is as fluid as possible.
Okay, great, thank you. And the board, I think, will certainly has every intention to continue to support. I take exception to those boards that freeload, essentially, by taking advantage of the work that's being done, but don't pony up the $600 or $700 or whatever it is. It's not a lot. $1,300. That
added together, you're right.
That's right. $600-700, whatever. It's not a lot to support the good work, and if everybody did it, it might cost us less if everybody participated. So thank you. Any comments or questions?
Indirect, it's KAC, it relates to potential elimination of student opportunity after high school. I don't know. I would like somebody to get on that and follow up the Campbell statement. I could see the director privately about that.
Yes. Do you have any further comments?
I just something from Cindy brought this to me. It's from Winchester Press, and sometimes we wonder, we close some schools and so forth. We wonder what happens to them. In my backyard, Augusta, we've got these two neat buildings. I had an opportunity to go through both of them, and it's interesting watching the community grow and evolve, and watching these seniors. Pretty neat spots for them. But here's another Maple Ridge, where a very innovative couple have taken Maple Ridge School and are doing something interesting. I just wanted you to see that there is life for some of these older buildings, and I think some creative people are taking them over, and I think they're serving the community well. So it's not just Martintown we're worried about.
Okay. I have nothing else to add, so I need a motion to adjourn. Trustee McMillan and Trustee Karkner. All in favor? Thanks, everyone.